We usually have a red box over here, so I'm waiting for the red box, but
Yeah, you
are we
should
live?
be live. You should be
Oh,
live.
well, okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to VR Download. I'm Ian Hamilton in New York, broadcasting today with David Heaney in London. The date is May 16th, 2024, and we're live on YouTube via OBS and David Heaney's UVR Studios. David, what do we have today?
Hello again, everyone. Obviously, we couldn't get to do the show on Tuesday because of Google I/O. We had expected that they might talk about Android XR, their VR and mixed reality platform, but it turned out they did not. That seems like that's going to happen later in the year, perhaps at Samsung's event. But we're going to start by talking about what Google did show at I/O, which was a teaser of multimodal AI smart glasses with a heads-up display. We'll then talk about SenseGlove Nova 2, a $6,000 wireless force feedback VR glove. And compared to the original, it's added palm pressure feedback. We'll talk about the Pew Research survey that showed that 1 in 4 US teenagers say they play games on a VR headset. 1 in 4. We'll then talk a little bit about Apple Vision Pro. Firstly, the announcement that it's getting system wide live captions, including for real life conversations. The release of Immersed for Apple Vision Pro, which gives you virtual extra monitors instead of just being limited to your one Mac display. And the report that Apple is about to start selling Vision Pro outside the US. So the US will not be the only country it's available in very soon. We then have a few smaller stories. The release of UltraLeap Hyperion, the new state of the art hand tracking technology, and Holoride filing for insolvency. Holoride being the company that was providing a Vive Flow based in car entertainment system for Audi and was talking to other manufacturers of cars. So we'll talk about that at the time. Finally, we'll finish off with the Meta Quest news. Firstly, Quest 2 and Quest 3 getting an experimental travel mode to make positional tracking work on airplanes. Then the announcement that Lufthansa will trial providing a Quest 3 headset to business class passengers on selected flights starting in this summer with a streamlined interface of preloaded apps. And finally, we'll talk about AppLab. So AppLab games are now publicly findable in the Quest store, and there is an AppLab tab, and that is phase one of Meta's grand plan to open up its store. So phase one has happened. Phase two, when is that going to happen, is the big question.
Yeah, what a massive lineup of stuff for us to get through today. I want to say hello to Guy Godin, Creator Virtual Desktop, in our comments, as well as a lot of regular viewers. Encouraging you to like, comment, subscribe. Thank you to our members for supporting us over on UploadVR.com, to our regular supporters here on YouTube. It means a lot to see your support. David just got the big update out for our website with big new update to the commenting system, as well as we've got reviews being reworked, and we just did another live show with Don Hopper earlier in this week, basically looking at all this massive game news that we talk about on this show in a broad industry-wide way, but we really got to dive into some of the hands-on impressions that Don is kind of like going in there on a daily basis and experiencing in all of those games. So it's been fantastic to see everything come together all at once as we're covering this evolution that's happening, and that will be my as far as I'm going to go off our notes here today, because we've got to get through a lot of items, and this first one is probably going to take up a lot of our time. Google teasing multimodal AI smart glasses with a heads-up display, or apparent heads-up display. I just received the Tilt 5 AR glasses in the mail, and the very first thing I did with them was I wore the Meta Ray-Ban smart glasses on the inside as I wore the Tilt 5 on the outside. And I'm starting to think that it's going to make a lot of sense for you to wear the same prescription glasses that you wear outside in form factor. What's keeping them from simply docking into your VR headset when you come home? Why can't we do that? Why won't we be able to do that in the future? Why do you need two sets of prescription lenses if you've got one already on you all the time?
Well, I guess one reason is the form factor, right? Headsets are getting slimmer and closer to your face, and there's just not enough space in the slimmer headsets now to put in your glasses. You physically could not put your glasses into a big screen beyond. Apple Vision Pro, you can kind of do it, but you're getting so close to the lenses there, you're going to scratch them. If you want, it totally made sense for headsets to support glasses back in the day when they were these big, giant, bulky Fresnel lens boxes on your face. But as they get closer and closer to this kind of sleek visor of the future that they're all kind of aiming for, it's just not going to be practical to have your glasses in there. Not to point out that you're going to also dramatically reduce your field of view, because even in the Quest 3 that does let you wear your glasses, you have to adjust the eye relief so that the VR lenses are further away from your eyes to the point that you're killing your field of view. I mean, to me, I'm not a glasses wearer, so maybe this is just, it's easy to say without being one, but as long as the prescription insert lenses are affordable, it doesn't seem like a huge problem to me to need one for your headset. Most people are not going to have multiple headsets, right? We are obviously VR news reporters and reviewers. We have multiple headsets. Most people will get a headset and keep it for like what, 3 or 4, maybe even 5 as we go on years. If you look at the Quest prescription lenses, the company that Meta's partnered with, it's $50, I believe. That doesn't seem crazy to me to put those in, and then you just put the headset on. You don't have that second step.
Yeah, no, what I was testing is this loop that you pointed out to me that exists there, where you can have a WhatsApp call where you're showing your view from the Meta Ray-Ban glasses. It's identical functionally to what you can do out of the Vision Pro when you share your view, and you can. The only thing keeping you from having one continuous phone call that extends from AR glasses in the real world to VR headset in whatever, virtual world you want to be looking at is platform. It's the platform barriers, right? I had to go from a WhatsApp call to a FaceTime call to make those two things work. And everything in between there, right? Like hardware wise is all barriers to being able to have what I just described, right? A continuous, like if I want to have a couple people hang out with me for a day, there's not going to be an easy handoff from taking them out with me in my ears basically into VR, because there's platform barriers between those two experiences.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be a very common experience to, be in a call with people and then jump into VR and have them continue to be there with you. But I think the solution there probably is going to be third-party services like Discord. We've seen some of the Quest firmware sleuths notice for years now that Meta is at least testing Discord integration. If you were on your PC on Discord and you were going to jump into a VR game, eventually that seems like an ideal platform layer for that. And I imagine eventually things like WhatsApp and Messenger are going to come to Vision Pro, right?
Yep.
Should we get into the first piece of news here?
Yep. Google teasing multimodal AI smart glasses. Why don't you break this down? Because this sounds pretty big and also not big at the same time. I'm confused about my feelings here. What did Google not reveal that we wanted them to reveal, and what is this instead?
Yeah, so as I mentioned in the intro, what we didn't see was Android XR. We thought that it was highly likely that Google was going to at least tease a little bit about Android XR. They did it last year's I/O, which is crazy when you think about it. They actually said at last year's I/O, we're building this platform in partnership with Samsung, and we're going to talk about it more later this year, that being 2023. Silence since then. And now we're a full year later at 2024's Google I/O. Now, what we exclusively reported on UploadVR is that Samsung is going to reveal this headset later this year in 2024, according to what they've told developers. So I expect that Google will be there at Samsung's event, just like Google has done in the past. There are certain Samsung Watch events that Google showed up at back in the Samsung Galaxy. I can't remember which one they're on now, S25, I think, event earlier this year. Google was there showing off Circle to Search. So they do seem to have that partnership at that point. So we're not hearing about that at I/O. We didn't hear anything about Android XR. What we did hear is a short teaser of these glasses. But as Ian points out, this isn't too much because it isn't a product announcement. It very clearly said that this is a prototype. They have no product announcements whatsoever in relation to glasses. All they did was show this off as an extension of their Project Astra demo. Project Astra being their in-development, real-time, natively multimodal AI assistant. that can remember and reason about what it sees and hears. And that might sound similar to GPT 4.0 if you watched OpenAI's presentation on Monday. But what makes Google's project Astra different is that in something like GPT 4.0, you ask it about what it sees, just like you might with the Meta AI on the Ray-Ban glasses, and then it takes a picture and answers. Whereas this project Astra AI that they're working on, again, no product announcement, just they're working on, continuously sees the environment and remembers what it sees over time. And Google says this works by, and I quote, continuously encoding video frames, combining the video and speech input into a timeline of events, and caching this information for efficient recall. So that's the AI side of things. When it comes to the glasses, they showed the person firstly asking their phone, where did I leave my glasses? And the phone answered, you left them over at the table beside the red apple, because it had seen when she was panning around the room where those glasses were. Then she picks up the glasses and you can see that they now have a heads up display showing the text output of the AI. It's no longer just audio. You can see text, and presumably that would mean that you could turn off the audio if you're in public or on a bus or something and you don't want everyone else to hear the response from your AI assistant. And basically, it looked like there was no AR component of this. There are no cameras visible here. This HUD was fixed. It was not moving around. But while Google doesn't have any product announcements around this, we have seen multiple reports suggest that the next generation of Ray-Ban Meta glasses will get a HUD, a fixed heads-up display that can do things like show your notifications. So your phone's in your pocket, you feel it buzz, instead of having to pull it out or look at a scrolling tiny text on a watch on your wrist where you can't even see the full message at once. You just see a little pop-up appear in your view that shows you your notification. Also responses from the AI. There's a lot you can do when you add a screen to a screenless system here. I suspect that Google really is just a prototype. Maybe they're talking to some companies about, maybe something like, I don't know, Lenovo or one of those other hardware makers about putting it into something that they make. But it sounds like Meta probably will be the first major company to ship this in a widespread product in the next generation of Ray-Bans. And I think with AI and these HUDs, we're going to see a class of product that arrives before AR glasses and continues to exist alongside AR glasses for much, much cheaper prices that are still very useful because of the rise of these large language models.
Well, then we get into branding hell. We've been avoiding the conversation for years, and I don't think we want to waste time on it here. But what you're describing is the Quest class of AR hardware without Quest class capabilities. So we're gonna be in branding hell when companies start trying to describe simple, basic what AI agent functionality without really great visuals or without really even like these things become very problematic when they don't have an active cellular connection to the internet in many cases today, right now, right?
Yeah, the Ray-Ban glasses and pretty much all of the other ones that I've heard of all rely on your phone. They don't have a 5G or 4G chip in themselves. They are piggybacking off your phone's connection. That in some way limits what companies like Meta can do. We have heard from the reports that when they do launch their full-scale AR glasses in 2027, that they will have a little companion wireless compute puck that sits in your pocket that does a lot of the computing and also has its own 4G, 5G modem, so that you could theoretically walk about without your phone. But with this, and I would strongly imagine this, it's still piggybacking off your phone.
I don't know if you get to fill in the bingo card for what David just did right there, but I'll credit it for him. Hello to Spatial Bigs, William Archer. We've got Mark, True, a lot of regular commenters out there. Thank you. Also, just want to remind everyone, do share out the link with others. We tend to build our audience through the course of the episode and end up with hundreds of viewers sometimes by the end from everyone sort of getting immersed in here in the future with us, because it's kind of, you're hitting me with it hard here, David, on the news here. Like we've gone right to the very first news article here talking about multimodal AI, and that's going to be a fairly new term even for our audience, right? It's going to be commonplace in a year's time or 2 years time, and that's wild to think of when, you're not going to have a lot of places discussing this in depth as we do. Are we ready to move on to the next subject, or any comments you want to talk about here first?
Firstly, we have a new YouTube member, Robin Dobb. Thank you for becoming a YouTube member. That's great to see. I think the last thing we'll just say on this is that you're seeing a lot of companies try to build purpose-built form factors for AI. You've got the Human AI pin. You've got a lot of different companies making like these necklace pendants, but they all seem suboptimal. To me, it's very, very clear that glasses are the optimal form factor for this AI revolution. It is very clearly there, and Meta seems to have gotten there by accident, right? They didn't build the Ray-Ban line around the idea of AI. This was something where the main idea for Ray-Ban Meta glasses, we've heard Meta executives admit this, was that they would have better cameras, better microphones, just be lighter, kind of a better product in general, be able to do the live streaming thing to Instagram. They probably always planned the first person WhatsApp and Messenger call thing we were talking about in last episode, but they never really expected that the Meta AI assistant would be something that's practical to get working on these glasses, and it's now just made the product a completely different proposition. And so, Meta's partnership with Ray-Ban is probably going to turn out one of their biggest strategic assets in this, and essentially happened by accident when it comes to AI glasses. This was something they always probably intended for until AR glasses come along. And as we see in the industry, it's taking many, many years longer than people originally thought to get to AR glasses. These kind of AI glasses with a HUD are going to be widespread far, far sooner.
Yeah, and even 2 lines of text is kind of in my mind as the minimum bar. If you can get 2 full lines of text displayed in front of a user where they're looking around, you can do live translation, you can do live subtitles, and we are going to be moving on to some of that very soon. True Motive's comment here, 2027 is an interesting target for the compute pocket device. So the idea that you have a computer in your pocket that does a lot of what you need to. I keep thinking back to this analogy that Abrash has talked about, where you've got, when you're at home, you've got all of this local compute. You can use all this local hardware that you can use to enhance your VR experience with the glasses at home. Whereas when you're outside the home, walking around, you don't have that. You've got to have something that fits into this form factor. What about when you've got in your pocket? And what companies, like, I think of this as an advantage for Apple to have such control over what's in your pocket as a companion computing device. But are we going to have a powerful mobile computer in our pocket to help us with these very soon in the future?
Yeah, I mean, that is Apple's massive advantage, right? Where they do have a compute pocket device. It's your iPhone, right? So it's very, very likely that when Apple eventually comes around to AR glasses, true AR glasses, not just HUD glasses, that they will piggyback off the iPhone. Use the fact that you have this high performance compute device that isn't limited by having to fit into the stem of glasses. Meta is having to do a compute puck, not because they want to, but because they have to, because you can't control that.
Jim Vedder's comment there. Can you answer Jim Vedder's question?
Sure. Yeah. Jim Vetter is asking, how does one join as a member? So you can join on YouTube, but we recommend, if you really want to support us directly, go to UploadVR.com, and in the top right, hit support us. That will support us directly. We will get more of the money than we would if you're supporting us on YouTube. So that's what we definitely recommend there.
All right. Are we ready to talk about this SenseGlove? Or are we still want to talk about glasses more?
Yeah, I guess the final thing I was going to just talk about is, I think Abrash was saying that it's not about that your glasses would be different at home. It's that when you go home, you pick up a headset, which is obviously doesn't have to look like this. It can look like something that clamps around your entire head. It can look more like a Vision Pro or a Quest 3, just because it's so much bigger and you got more space to dissipate thermals. You don't have to have that separate compute device. You can put all the compute into the headset itself.
Yeah, Arlen saying a smartphone is a phone in name only at this point. And, I appreciate that sentiment, and it is very problematic at the same time, right? You've got multiple generations of people who have survived marketing generations like post PC or Mac versus PC, and these terms that have tried to encapsulize 40 years of computing. And now we're in this new phase where, right, like you've got you potentially have a a 2080 plus GPU, right? Like a really modern GPU potentially sitting in a server less than a mile from you and potentially beaming you any virtual world you want. Like you could have that sort of thing as what provides you your entertainment in the very near future, with major, major caveats like we describe on the show all the time, right? Like when you go without a certain when you overwhelm the networks, you don't want your VR experience to suddenly get choppy. So that is something we always have to keep in mind. Ready to talk about the glove?
Yeah, I think the last thing is, if you're just gonna just to kind of jump off on that, I think eventually in the very, very, very long term, but no time soon, you could imagine that instead of having a compute device in your pocket, and to be clear, the one that Meta is reportedly going to have will be screenless. It'll be like, imagine a more rounded phone that's just kind of this puck that sits in your pocket. But eventually, you would imagine the glasses do talk to an edge server if you're in a city, for example, and you can just put on the glasses. And it's not that all the compute's being done on board, because for thermal reasons, it's always going to be a nightmare to try and do all the compute in the stem of glasses, right? Think of how hot your phone gets on a summer day and how much it slows down. Now try to do that on a pair of glasses. Crazy difficult engineering problem. But if you do offload a lot of that, it's going to be a lot easier, but still you're running into the problem of the thermals of the actual wireless transmission at that point are starting to be a huge problem. But yes, let's finally, unless you have anything else to add, we can move on to talk about SenseGlove.
Yeah, I love contextualizing this stuff a little bit. Right now we're going to talk about gloves. Gloves would be the natural endpoint that people have in mind for haptic feedback. And it's a hard thing to talk about that as the endpoint because we are in a major transitional period for developers. We have a lot of devs. We've even hosted a guest editorial on our site from one of the creators of Job Simulator, warning devs that they need to have a plan for how to approach hand tracking sometime soon. We published that on our website recently. The days of Oculus Touch as the dominant input mechanism for interacting with VR content probably are limited. Like, is that too much to say, David? I don't know. That's maybe I'm going out on a limb here. Gloves are at the end of that transition on the other end. So tell me if I'm wrong there, David, and tell us about these gloves.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of tension in coming years between touch-like controllers and hand tracking. Already with Vision Pro, there's a huge debate. I would say it's probably the most controversial thing at the moment in this industry, right? Other than maybe where do you put the battery on the headset. Those are the two, right? Where do you put the battery in the headset, and what's the input method? There's some people that are vehemently adamant that controllers are dead and hand tracking is everything and that the Vision Pro is the path forward. And others will come along and say, no, the biggest problem with the Vision Pro is that despite this great operating system and these amazing displays, the level of interactivity just sucks because you don't have these precision controllers. And you have Mark Zuckerberg pointing out repeatedly that in his view, one of the best things about Quest versus Vision Pro is these precision controllers. So all the way at the top, Meta believes that. It's a really difficult, controversial topic. And, I see someone, Shalaska, in the comments here. One of the things about Quest is you can pick up a controller. With multimodal, you can have one and your other hand free. You can pick up two controllers. You can throw them back.
But okay, so sorry, I'm getting defensive now because they okay, I said I jumped off a cliff here on my comment. All right, so you're right. Yes, you can have both. My question will be is like by year end of let's say 2025, will people be holding controllers in their hands more than 50% of the time that they're wearing the headset, or less than 50% of the time will they have controllers in their hands? I mean, tracked Oculus Touch.
It's a good question, but I think it depends what they're doing. I think that these headsets are going to grow to encompass the use cases that Vision Pro has in cheaper form factors, right? You're going to get cheaper headsets that are also great portable cinemas and great portable spatial computing machines that can turn your laptop into a 5-monitor setup with really great resolution. That is going to grow without controllers, but it's not going to come at the expense of gaming. VR gaming is going to continue to grow itself on this completely separate path. And I think most people who are doing VR gaming will probably be holding controllers, even if most people that are using a VR headset are not using controllers, because those use cases are going to grow. There's some people who still think the only use case for VR is gaming. That's clearly not true. One of the biggest use cases of VR already is fitness. One of the biggest uses is social, where if you're in something like VR chat, more and more people now are starting to use hand tracking solutions because it gives you the full expressivity. Yes, there will be gaming that involves around hands, right? I have a Vision Pro, you have a Vision Pro. There are games that use your hands, but they simply don't match up to the depth of interaction that is possible when you have tracked controllers with button inputs, right? You can't deliver Asgard's Wrath 2 with hand tracking. You can't deliver, the games that are coming up like Batman and like Alien. You can't do that. And yeah, we'll soon talk about why gloves eventually could be the best of both worlds when it comes to this.
Yeah, wonderful points. In the middle of that, I used the Waltz of the Wizard hand interaction where I separated my two fingers here, pulled back a little slingshot imaginary in my head, and fired a little bullet at David's head here to demonstrate that gameplay would be perfectly fine with hand tracking only. You just have to have a really good developer play with it. Let's talk about this, David. I've distracted us long enough, and we have way too many topics to get through.
Yeah, we could debate this all day. It is the hottest debate in the industry. But yeah, this is right now VR gloves exist, right? And there's two kinds. There are what I call vibration gloves, which are just you have a glove on and each finger has a separate vibration motor. Those are at somewhat consumer pricing. You can get some of them for like $500. They don't really add a huge amount compared to just open hand tracking. Yeah, you got a little bit of vibration, but you can't grab anything. It's not like actual real feedback. But the holy grail is force feedback gloves, and they do exist today. If you've been around in the industry, you'll know this. Some of the new people don't realize they do exist, with the massive caveat that they cost thousands of dollars. So this SenseGlove Nova, the original was $5,000, and this new one we're talking about today is $6,000. And when I say force feedback, that means that as you try to grab something, they will actually provide resistance. So you will be unable to close your palm, your hand, because it's simulating the fact that you're holding an object. And I've tried this, and some of these are really, really cool. It's something that one day, I imagine, even if it's 20 years from now, it's going to be the dominant input method for VR, because it makes so much sense. You get the advantage of having your hands free, except you have a glove on, right? You still have your full dexterity. You can still pick up objects. You can still pick up your coffee mug or your drink, or anything you need to do with your hands. Type on a keyboard while you get this kind of force feedback. And so, we'll just quickly cover the news here. So the original had resistance on your fingers equivalent to a 2 kilogram brick on each finger, so 20 newtons of resistance. And this one has the same level of resistance. It also does have the vibration motors on your index finger and thumb to simulate texture. But what this newly adds is palm pressure. So now, instead of just feeling resistance on your fingers, you actually get pressure pushed into your palm to simulate what it's like to really feel like you're grabbing something. And one of the really cool things that SenseGlove claims this can do is allow you to simulate a handshake in social VR. So this is obviously for enterprise, right? So the use case here is you're in a collaboration app where you're all standing around like a CAD model of a jet engine or something. And you turn around to someone's avatar and you put out your hand and you can actually shake hands with them. Now, that's a bit of a gimmick, and it's just an example of what this can do. The real advantage here is for just feeling like you're actually holding an object, right? Whether it be a drill, a saw, a grinder, a hammer, pliers, anything that a company would be training for. Because the main use case for these gloves is that they are used for like training and simulation. The comment here from Wabo, this glove will need power from battery though, right? Yeah, they do have an onboard battery. They're wireless, to be clear. There is another company called Haptics that has this giant power pack you wear on your back. It's like a backpack. The cool thing about SenseGlove, you can Google SenseGlove CES 2022 if you want to see my hands-on impressions. I did try this thing. You can read about that on Upload. The cool thing about these is they're wireless. And I'll just quickly cover the fact that this is already being used, right? You have Volkswagen uses these to train manufacturing assembly workers for one of their cars. There is a medical company that uses it for medical training. There's a robotics company that uses it for remotely controlling a robot, where you can kind of grab things with the robot arm and feel it. And the Royal Netherlands Army has been trialing it to train equipment assembly engineers for equipment that costs a lot of money if you get it wrong. So there's some things that they assemble, and if you screw it up, cost a lot of money. They train it in VR. It's a perfect example of what VR is good for, but we are still a long, long way off this being at consumer cost. We know the companies like Meta have been researching it. One thing they've been doing in that is trying to invent new materials. As crazy as that sounds, try and make this a more practical thing. But yeah, eventually one day, it's hard to imagine that this isn't the dominant input factor for VR. Eventually one day.
Yeah, people are remembering the Power Glove. Of course, you cannot have a conversation about gloves without remembering that scene in your head of him telling you it's so bad. And we've seen recreations of the Power Glove even in WebXR, where you can have a control mechanism where you just tilt your arm like this, and it's like having a Power Glove on your wrist for a game over there, and you don't even have to press the stuff. There's so many ideas here to go with. I saw over on Twitter these experimental ideas of wrist buttons, right? To have wrist buttons. And if you combine that with the idea that you could have haptics on the back, like in a watch form factor, vibrating with each tap, you could do quite a lot of really enhanced haptics with that effect, with that sync up of like doing that sort of thing. And then it's funny to think of just how far you could get if you did that on both wrists. If you had a wristband that provided really accurate haptics on both wrists, and then had a whole UI hand tracking system built around those haptics, how far could you get without even having to do all of this other stuff that this glove is talking about right inside the hand?
Yeah, there is a lot of research on that. We've seen Meta, for example, research that where if you vibrate on the wrist at the right time, it can feel like you've added a little bit of haptics to hand tracking. It's still just not going to be anywhere near the feeling of actually grabbing something, right? You like this is obviously a mock-up image, but I did try the original SenseGlove Nova, and it does really feel like you're grabbing something. It's a sensation that nothing other than actual physical resistance on your fingers will do it, right? You have to actually have something to stop your finger. Otherwise, if I'm grabbing a ball right now with hand tracking, I can just do that, and the illusion is dead, right? A developer can do something about that, right? They can have the ball like explode or fly off or drop out of your hand, sure, but you're never gonna. That's always gonna feel like this kind of ephemeral object. It's never going to have the physicality of something really stopping you.
Sure, what gets the meme of touch grass, right? Okay, go touch grass is this wonderful meme that is going to grow with time as we deal with VR, because these gloves and things like it, one of the things haptics, we saw it come up in our comments. What's this idea of like brushing your fingers through grass that's on the ground and trying to simulate that sort of really individualized haptic sensation? It's going to be so long before we get anything that does that. However, the very first demo that Vision Pro users got was a little butterfly floating around, and in my demo the butterfly did not land on my fingertip, it just fluttered away. But apparently some people sort of fill in the blanks mentally when they feel that butterfly come over to their fingertips and kind of get that little haptic effect without anything actually happening to them. If you can get that subtle of an effect, what, let's say 20 times in 100, let's say it's a 20% of the time that you're able to get that out of people doing that demo with literally no haptics whatsoever, what can you do with just the subtlest amount? And then of course, yes, we want this not to cost $15,000. We want it to cost $500. But
Well,
how far can you get on just the subtle stuff?
yeah, I agree that there's going to be a lot that can be done there. Probably for feeling like something is touching you. I actually did have the butterfly land on me in the Vision Pro demo, and I agree with you. There is something there where you almost feel like it's climbing along your finger, even though there's no haptics of any sort. But you're never going to feel like you can grab the butterfly. I keep kind of repeating myself here almost, but to be clear, this is 6,000 for the pair. It's not 6,000 each. I know that doesn't make it any better, but it's not. We have seen some indie kind of hacker makers working on things that could deliver something like this for a lot cheaper. And I've been following some of those projects, and hopefully they get somewhere soon. I just think it's a matter of time before someone does come up with a way to do this at consumer cost, even if it does take 5 or 10 years.
And I don't think we'll be on it here too long. So why don't you look at the comments here and see if there's anything we should get into before we get into our last subject here in our opening section, and then we've got Vision Pro coming up.
Yeah, so we have Sampler asking whether these gloves are subtle enough to feel a little resistance of grass. No, this is not like, so the haptics gloves that people are talking about are the state of the art, but they're also they at least used to be a little bit more expensive. I'm not sure if their pricing has changed recently. They do keep their pricing quite secretive, but they also, the limitation of the haptics gloves is they have this giant backpack thing you have to wear. That's fine in certain circumstances, but
And
it's not.
Yeah, let's give some context. Our haptics actually sent out kind of like a warning letter, kind of like a please don't copy us letter out, warning Meta of when Meta showed research that seemed to be in the same kind of area as the technology that haptics is pursuing. And what David is saying is absolutely right. All the haptics technology looks like it's this giant beefy thing. However, I'm gonna get an email. If the people at Haptics watch us, they know us. If Kyle's in our comments, he knows them too. They're always saying they're working on something smaller, better, cheaper, just like any startup, any company in this space. And that's why they kind of put out this warning letter across the bow to Meta saying, hey, look, if you really think we're on the right track here, maybe you should talk to us above board, was the way I observed that kind of news, right? Like that's my analysis there of what happened there. But again, this is what David's pointing out, has to get down into something that you can reasonably strap to your arm and have all of those little sensations like grass. But yes, there's little things on your fingertips here that can give you a little sensation, but no, it's so far away from running your fingers through the grass.
Well, with this haptics one, from the people I've spoken to that have tried it, apparently really, really is. Again, the trade-off that you is this, but the advantage here is that this one is state of the art. It really probably does feel like that. I think
I've used it, and it's
Yeah.
like it's hard to describe. Like I have used it's a proof of concept in the same way a DK1 was a proof of concept that VR has a solution there, but it will not be what you're describing until you've got a whole consumer process to iterate it down to what consumer buyable levels over a decade. So like, yes, you can still feel a little bit of that effect, but like it's heavy, right? You're not going to want to do the grass touching for long because of that and stuff like, and it's like you're not going to be able to, like, I don't know, pull apart the grass and pick out a bug from the middle, like all those little things that you would want to do with that simple interaction. I didn't see that proof of concept.
Well, I mean, I think that's an app side thing in terms of pulling it apart. That's something that the application itself would need to simulate. On the left here, for any of our viewers, this is the Meta research glove from a few years ago, and you can see on the right Haptex's glove. And yes, they were a little frustrated there. It's difficult to know where I land on this one. I think it's very possible that separate teams come up with separate solutions. I don't think the idea of a VR glove is universal to haptics, right? This is something that's been in science fiction for decades. It's an obvious final solution for VR. There are only so many technological paths that are possible here. It's a classic tale of big company does something similar to a startup gets mad. Maybe that's me judging them too harshly, but I guess I have to take the devil's advocate from, I think, the position you were giving.
Yeah, I'm forgetting what number they're on their kits, but it's I guess this gets in, if they're at, like, let's say dev kit 2, right? I'm forgetting what haptics' numbers are. I'm saying this starts to get really interesting at like dev kit 6, maybe 5 or 6. And DK2 things got really interesting on the headset side of things, but it still feels we're multiple iterations from like me looking at this audience and saying, hey, you guys, you really need to go buy this thing to develop your future haptic experiences on.
Yeah, it definitely is very, very early. It's something that right now, it's something that enterprises are using. Companies, like I just said, Volkswagen's using it to train assembly workers. The Royal Dutch Army's using it. When we talk about SenseGlove, there are other companies using haptics. I think Meta has probably the right research direction when it comes to the focus of new materials. I think this probably is one of those things where you're going to need some advances in material science to get this down to like the ideal thin and light glove that you put on and just works. But yeah, are you ready to talk about the next topic?
Yeah, I love the commenters though. We do have very astute commenters that immediately went to the very real usability issues, like it's smelling like workout equipment if you're using these things too often, and if it's that expensive, you're not going to want to use it for entertainment. You're going to want to use it only for work. If you're making that kind of an expense on something like this, so there's all sorts of just I love them thinking through whether this is actually ever going to work. Like there's other ways near term that might be more interesting.
Yeah, I still want to maintain that there's nothing that can fully approximate a glove when it comes to arbitrary objects. You can have, touch controllers with their grip triggers. You can have valve index style solutions where you're letting your hand go, but you're still grabbing the same shape over and over, and that's just not the same thing as arbitrary shapes. The demos I've tried of force feedback gloves have convinced me that this is the eventual future. But yeah, I think we're agreeing here that this is still very, very early technology, and all those kind of usability issues are definitely going to have to be worked out, including I'm assuming better materials is just the core here that I see. But yeah, are we ready to? Um, I guess you could have replacement like insets, like you have a kind of inset for where your fingers
Yeah,
actually
we
contact.
both want the same. We don't want to move on. We want to talk about haptic gloves. We want to
Well,
think through.
we have nine more
I'm ready.
subjects.
Okay, no, yeah, I know, right? But you want to keep going. I want to. All right, so I want like something. I want to like a wristband, a bracelet that you can lock a gauntlet onto, right? Like that you can really lock in something and feel like you're a robot all of a sudden, right? That's it. You to have all the mech games. That's the dream. This if you're putting this thing on, you better have an awesome mech game to launch your system with. All right, I'm sorry, I'm done now. Let's talk about 1 in 4 teenagers saying they play games on a VR headset. I love David going and grabbing this study because I am Pew, their research, the way they did this research could be faulty, but probably not. They are known for doing pretty well. They're known for studying things pretty decently. And the thing here is like this is the opposite of the narrative we hear from everyone else, right? Like there's a lot of people out there um that think VR is dead, and this is one of the only data points we have to point to them otherwise. So, David, why don't you break this down? Why we picked this one out when so many other people are kind of like telling us we're idiots, for VR is dead.
Yeah, so as you say, we would mostly ignore these kind of surveys, except this is Pew, which is considered to be high quality. We looked at the methodology, and this was of thousands of U.S. children between 13 and 17 were asked. They claim that the participants were recruited primarily through national random sampling of residential addresses and weighted to be representative of U.S. teens aged 13 to 17 who live with their parents by age, gender, race, and ethnicity. And so 1 in 4 surveyed said that they play games on a VR headset. And broken down by gender, that is 33% of boys and 15% of girls. So that is a third of US teen boys saying that they play games on a VR headset. You may be wondering about the wording we're saying here, because this doesn't mean they own a headset. This could include them playing games on their siblings' headset or on their parents. This is just about, do they have a headset in their household that they use to play games? And we've heard from many developers now in recent years that teens are their fastest growing demographic. You have obviously the stereotypical example of some of the games that teens are using, like Gorilla Tag, but even across many different kinds of games, it seems to be a very clever segment to target right now. A lot of the interesting reports we've seen from developers, again, this hasn't been studied yet, but reports are suggesting that the teenagers are a lot less sensitive to motion sickness in VR through artificial locomotion, i.e., pushing the thumbstick. It may be that the younger that you start doing this, the more that your body builds up a tolerance to it or gets used to it. Whereas a lot of older adults start to, feel sick and can never resolve that. There are plenty of adults who, right, they get VR. There's all this, enthusiast shouting about, oh, you'll get your VR legs anytime soon. Just, if you buy this gaming product and feel sick, use it again and feel sick again and again. That's not a great sell to anyone outside of enthusiasts. Just to be clear to enthusiasts, that's not what anyone ever wants. There is no other product other than alcohol that people will continuously use when they get sick. So that's not a good sell.
Oh my gosh. All right. So I'm seeing people really focusing on our last like I love the comments still going off about the haptics. There was one from James about a mushroom growing off of my haptic gloves, which was very disturbing to imagine. Um the the idea that you have a VR headset in the house that you use occasionally is a really interesting concept, and it's really interesting to think of that being a major win for Meta potentially over Apple. So you've been incredibly good about pointing this out, David, about how Apple has complete capability to support multiple accounts logged into a single device across any of their devices. It would be trivial for them to figure out some kind of system for you to log into multiple things, and they choose not to. There's some company-wide edict to not make it easy for you to switch between devices. However, in Meta's situation, they've gone through the hard work over the last few years from Facebook to Meta accounts to make it fairly quick to switch accounts on a Meta Quest. And if you don't have, if you don't have a lot of money and you've got $300 or $200 to get a VR headset, and then a couple years later, right, like the kid is able to get, afford touch controllers based on their lunch money or on their allowance from doing chores, and they have the touch controllers that they keep to themselves and bring over to the family VR headset. Like, that's actually just, I'm imagining stuff right there, but like, is that actually a big market opportunity for Meta that is unavailable to Apple because of this one headset per person type thing?
Yeah, I think so. I think that a lot of US families are likely doing this. Families around the world are likely doing this, where they have a headset that siblings share and use different accounts because, Meta has gone to the effort of getting multiple accounts working. It is fairly trivial. It's just like when you have a Xbox or PlayStation console that you have in your living room in the family, and you all have your own account, and sometimes one person uses it. And I think that's likely what a lot of these teens are reporting. But yeah, the fact that 1 in 4 US teens are playing VR games, it just does not square at all with the pessimist narrative that VR is still a niche technology. A lot of people, I saw recently when the Batman VR game Arkham Shadow was announced, you see a lot of comments from angry flat screen gamers saying, why are you doing this for like this niche, tiny little industry? And it's just not the case anymore. Like VR is not a tiny niche industry. So many people's idea of what VR is still stuck in 2016, right? Which is, it's 8 years ago, right? You're talking about almost a decade ago. The world that we're in now, as of 2024, VR is a real consumer market with, that's doing billions of dollars a quarter. That 1 in 3 Quest Store games make millions of dollars of revenue. Meta has sold north of 20 million Quests. There are roughly as many Quest headsets out there as there are Xbox Series X and S. Like, this is no longer this niche enthusiast thing. This is a real consumer market. And you get these occasional data points like this that show you that. One of the ones last year was the Black Friday stats that showed just how popular VR was on Black Friday. If you go at any Amazon sale, or even generally typically on around Christmas especially, and look on the top video game consoles, Quest is almost always there in the top 3 or top 5. Like, you have these Quests that are just flying off the shelves. This is a real industry, and a lot of people need to adjust their expectations of where this is right now. And we're not going to talk about it today because we simply don't have time. But when the cheaper version of Quest 3 comes out, Quest 3 Lite or Quest 3S, whatever it ends up being called, you're going to see another kind of massive surge of momentum of bringing a bunch of new people into this industry.
Yeah, I guess I'll do a plug to go watch our game show where we recapped a lot of the gaming news that has happened over the last 6 months. And when you go and look at things like Batman, Arkham Shadow, and the Alien game that just got announced finally, you're seeing just the beginnings of the story being told for the stuff that's possible on the Quest 3 headset, right? And I like that we've got Guy in our comments he's got the feature that emulates all sorts of things at this point with virtual desktop, with just the built-in software. And when you combine the XR2 in standalone with everything Guy is doing just in his app, plus all the stuff that Meta is going to be doing on an operating system level, and then you team up a company like Microsoft with that ecosystem, you start giving all your fans that were like flat gamers uh, only saying like, wait, I only play this game on my big PC or my big Xbox. You're actually giving them a reason to come over to the other side and abandon their ridiculous fanboy arms of like, I only play this on my stupid TV. Like, what are you actually defending in that situation? You're defending watching things on your TV, playing things like, oh, stop it. But like, we're going to see that shift happen over the course of this year where people are going to like see what an Xbox branded Quest 3. It's going to be in their colors that represent their brand for the first time after years and years of Xbox and Microsoft saying, we're not interested. They're actually going to embrace it in a new way that they didn't feel like doing before.
Yeah, and it'll also be interesting to see, Asus ROG, Republic of Gamers, a massive brand amongst gamers, especially PC gamers, bring out a headset, and we'll see what kind of marketing they do around that. And obviously, then Lenovo having a work focused one. But yeah, I think it's one of those things where the Batman game was an example of, I think some people, it's almost like they can see that it's big now, but they're in denial. And I think as you get more and more of these big games, right? We've had an Assassin's Creed game now, an Alien game coming. As more of these big IPs come out, and you get people seeing, on YouTube and TikTok, people playing them, people trying them out, it's going to be realized,
Yeah, so you're making me mad, like David, because what you're describing, what you've described is we should have a lot of YouTubers on a weekly basis coming out and saying, holy crap, there were 10 more games playable in VR this week than there weren't last week. That's how big the shift is with things like Flat to VR and Team Beef doing things. They're on almost like, it's on a weekly basis. There's new massive worlds that, holy crap, you can go and enjoy in complete VR. And they're doing marvels with the comfort settings and the settings to switch between third person and first person. And none of these, like it's almost mainstream YouTube now, because YouTube has pulled the rug of revenue out from so many creators that are attached only to the YouTube platform. So like no one really wants to make money just on YouTube. So there's a lot of like creators that should be talking about how amazing the Quest 3 is, who just aren't, because like there's a lot of people abandoning the job.
Yeah, there certainly are big changes in dynamics of YouTube. But to be fair, I have actually seen a few tech YouTubers that Quest 3 has been that threshold for them. For example, there's someone at Digital Foundry, the Great Digital Foundry YouTube channel, which is an incredible resource for learning about the graphics pipelines in games and performance of certain consoles. They have really come around to Quest and standalone VR as of Quest 3. The pancake lenses, the Wi-Fi 6E, the AV1 codec, that's for them in virtual desktop. They've described that as like a threshold moment where you can now, for $500, get this headset that can do wireless PC VR with really good quality lenses and a really great signal through, Guy Godin's virtual desktop, as well as obviously Steam Link as well. Paradise Decay pointing out in the comments, a YouTuber that they cover a lot of VR games, and saying that Digital Foundry loves VR and they enjoy their videos too. Seeing also Spatial Bigs in the comment, shout out to DF Digital Foundry. Yeah, I've seen a few YouTubers like this really start to feel like Quest 3 is that threshold moment. And I think this is something that we talk about sometimes, but not enough. Wabo saying, John from Digital Foundry, Danny Blitz pointing out Digital Foundry. Yeah, a lot of people calling them out there is a great example. But I'm seeing not just in YouTubers, but in people on X, for example, tech influencers, some game developers, that they get the Quest 3 and it just goes past that threshold. And it's not that anything has fundamentally changed, right? Yes, pancake lenses are a new type of lens, but it's not like we've gone to like holographic displays. It's just that you finally have lenses that are sharp almost all the way over and give you a clear view. You finally have a standalone chipset that can produce graphics that don't suck with the XR2 Gen 2, right? It's graphics that are past a point where many gamers are actually able to feel immersed and not be constantly distracted by how terrible everything looks, like Quest 1 and Quest 2 sometimes did. And then you obviously also for PC VR, you get that AV1 codec, Wi-Fi 6E. You get the color pass through. It almost sounds like a Quest 3 ad here, and I promise that's not what I'm trying to do. I'm just saying that one thing I really noted in my review, and I'm kind of very optimistic about now, is that with Quest 3, we are past that boundary where a $500 or below headset can provide an excellent experience for VR.
Yeah, I think let's use this as a transition to talk about Vision Pro, since David has done such a like he's trying to balance out what David's doing to talk about Quest 3. I think the experience that I delighted in, that I continue to delight in the Vision Pro, is the feeling of my digital assets, my digital content sort of springing to life around me in all sorts of ways. So 3D models, videos, photos, uh, messages, everything is all there that I already do on all my other devices. And that stuff has been largely missing in Quest. But as you had pointed out, even today, right before on this show, right, it's perfectly usable now to go into the Quest browser and log into 3 different websites and use them as my basis for an office on the Quest system. But it's taken what, we're on version 65 of the Quest OS to get there, just as a base level of functionality to use it, whereas Vision OS launched with it on day one and gave me all those other things that I'm still kind of having to struggle for. So like when we were bug fixing a situation on the Quest, and the solution we arrived at was maybe factory reset the Quest. And I'm like, well, but David, I have to download all my videos off of there. I don't have a really good cloud system set up on the Quest. And that's, again, an example of real time what Meta is building out week to week to week to try to improve their ecosystem. And absolutely what David is saying there is it's over a threshold for a lot of people, but like there's a whole lot of other people that just need to slip right into a professional workflow that they've already got. And that's what Vision Pro is doing right now. So why don't you talk about Vision Pro and get us through this news?
Yeah, I think just to quickly respond to what you said there, that is going to be Meta's focus for the next year. You can see they're already been doing it, right? They're trying to polish up the experience of using 2D apps in Quest. We know they're working on an overhaul when it comes to how the Quest space manages 2D apps. Right now, you're very restricted to having this triple setup. They're working on letting you arbitrarily position them like on Vision Pro. I think that the Quest OS, or as it's called now, Horizon OS, will look very different in a year from now. But yeah, we're at the point where it's very practical to do browser-based stuff. The problem is that you don't have native apps, right? And it is a much better experience. Sorry, web people, it just is to have real native apps on the Vision Pro. But I think one of the big divides here that I've pointed out before in this show for whether Vision Pro or Quest is better to be stuck in for a while is whether you're American or European or anywhere else in the world. And it really is that iMessage versus WhatsApp thing, right? Because I always hear Americans saying, oh, I don't have my messages in Quest. And you say that to a European and they'll say, of course you do. You've got WhatsApp sitting right there in the Quest.
Yeah.
But when Americans say messages, you mean iMessage. And that's what the rest of the world would, when you think of like, what is your default messaging app? You meet a new person, what do you message them on? The majority of Europeans, it's WhatsApp. I'm pretty sure that's the case for South America, for parts of Africa, for Asia, from the people I've met at least. Whereas in America, it's iMessage, and that's a huge difference right now.
Yeah, David and I have encountered that in our work, and he's absolutely right. And ultimately, you can see why Mark Zuckerberg paid, what was it, 19 billion, I think, at the time for WhatsApp. It was just an extraordinary number that the founders of WhatsApp were able to basically command from Mark Zuckerberg to hand over to them for that property. And what it's done is give them a global presence in SMS messaging. And we're in the trenches now. We're talking about the absolute platform battle of our lifetime here. The way these things work on certain platforms and not on other platforms, and exactly what David's saying. Like we've got in congressional meetings, senators trying to figure out why certain text bubbles are blue and others are green. It's absurd how stupid some of the level of discourse is when we're talking about like multinational companies trying to figure out how to like win the future of personal computing, right? Like that's ultimately what we're dealing with, and that's why the bubble is green, Senator. So the when we've got let's see, why don't we go right into these first few Vision Pro things, because I do not want to be in here for 3 hours, and I don't think our audience is going to be following us. So I want you to
Yeah.
summarize some of this.
Yeah, and I think we're starting to get into the summer here, where the other big difference between the US and Europe to go on this is in the US by default buildings have air conditioning, and in Europe, despite the fact that we're in a warming world, we don't. Europe was not built for this heat. It's slowly transitioning into this level of heat
Wait,
through.
is that what we get, David? Is that we get the next 10 years of like you just complaining that America is heating up England for you? Is that
No,
like
no,
my
I'm
VR
not
is
saying that.
heating
I'm not
up?
saying that at all. I'm saying obviously the world is, we're as a planet, we're pumping trillions of dollars or trillions of tons of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. We don't need to talk about that. The point is, in Northern Europe, it was meant to be cold here. When I was a kid, it was a lot colder than it was now. It's yeah, but we'll get into this Vision Pro news as I try not
So,
to pass out
well,
after 2 hours at being in a
well,
headset in this kind of heat.
oh my gosh. Well, Guy Godin saying, if someone asked me to reach out to them on WhatsApp, I would give them a weird look and check their temperature. I like that. Probably in Fahrenheit, right? Because that's the joke that was going around Twitter was using Celsius versus Fahrenheit. Um, Ironically, like I did, so because of the view sharing feature, I wanted to test that out, and it was really impressive. But I also had to use WhatsApp to contact sources in recent weeks. I was trying to find them, and sure enough, I found a surgeon in one country who was using, I believe it was Vision Pro, and they explained the entire surgical procedure. And like I've got it all sitting inside the WhatsApp. It's just a very hard article to write to make sure I'm get everything right about surgery and all this stuff. But like the idea that you could view all of your imagery on these big giant screens while operating remotely to begin with is a really, really interesting idea. And I use the WhatsApp to communicate across borders with someone to get this information. And I did the very same thing with another source in another country on Holoride, which is coming up soon in our discussion. So, like, it's you will find people's borders and their preconceptions in exactly what we're discussing here over WhatsApp versus SMS messaging. And there are very legitimate reasons why you've got to reach out across those borders. And it's so important that we talk about this on an ongoing basis, because VR quite literally removes every one of those borders. But what we do on the show is we talk about like the barriers that are still there anyways.
Yeah, the software and hardware level imposed barriers that take away that dream of no barriers. And I think you pointed out before that it's very possible that we'll live in a world where the only way that you can contact another spatial persona is through an Apple headset, right? I don't see Apple bringing spatial personas to Horizon OS anytime soon, but I could absolutely see Meta bringing Horizon Worlds and Horizon Home to a Vision OS one day, right? In the same way that they have many of their apps on Apple platforms. But that's a big discussion in itself. Let's get straight to the topics we're talking about today.
Off mute there to get us derailed. I'm not going to do it.
Don't do it. Don't do it. We're I know it's so tempting. But we'll start with the first of our three pieces of Vision Pro news we're talking about today, which is that Apple has announced that it's getting system-wide live captions. And this is both for audio and apps. Any app, as long as it's playing audio, you will be able to have live captions. And also for live conversations, which you see in the only image Apple released of this, where you're sitting across from someone with your Vision Pro on and you're getting captions. And this is obviously designed for people who are either deaf or are hard of hearing, have a hearing impairment. And so that will allow them to use Vision OS and many of the apps and read spoken audio without having to be able to directly hear it. And obviously accessibility, things like this are great because anyone who is in that circumstance is going to already have these features on their existing device, right? iOS and Android both have great support for system-wide Captions. And so Apple is now just bringing it over to this new OS. In comparison, Quest has captions, live captions in the Meta Quest TV app and in the Quest store, but nowhere else. But Meta has said that they are exploring having this exact same thing. And to be clear, this isn't like AR. This isn't detecting the person's face and like putting it beside them. You can see the window positioning bar here. This is just something that it's just sampling the microphone and you position the captions yourself. Maybe one day Apple will have it so that, you know, it's underneath someone. And the obvious suggestion that a lot of people have asked about is, you know, will this be able to translate? Because one of the many demos you constantly see of AR glasses, one of the North Star use cases of AR glasses is that you're able to translate, right? You're on a foreign holiday and the waiter comes up and doesn't speak English and says something to you and you see English captions directly under them. That's the kind of thing that I'm sure we'll get eventually here. This is just version 1 of live captions.
The obvious question being asked in our comments is, could this also be used to translate between languages? That would be the eventual goal. There is no announcement of that being done right now, but we're going to see that tech demo, I think, demonstrated about 15 to 300 times before the end of the year, because this is what Apple's intending to ship. The next obvious step is going to be exactly what you describe, and from Google on down, they're going to be a race to try to show that they can do that. You're going to have to watch for reporters you trust, writers you trust, to really explain that, right, the translation was wrong, or it took 45 seconds to get a response sometimes. Like, those are all the things we talk about on the show. Those are all going to be real world barriers to exactly what you're describing. Like, what is the most, like, the translation scenario that you're describing, the most, the periods where you would want live translation are the periods where you're going to have the worst cellular connection. And that's going to be a big issue.
Sure, eventually you're going to want this to run on device, right? This is something we've talked about many times when it comes to AI. That the big issue today with these impressive large language models is that they are large. They are running on this really powerful server-side GPU that is costing a non-trivial amount of money for these companies to even run, and obviously limits you to internet connectivity, positive situations. So when you're using a Vision Pro indoors on your Wi-Fi network, that's not going to be a huge issue, right? We've seen that with speech-to-speech models, the translation can be really, really fast, even when it's done server side. But you're absolutely right to say that if you want this to be good enough to one day run on glasses as you're on holidays, for example, you absolutely want that to run locally. You don't want to be dependent on a signal when you might not have one. Or you might even be in a country where like you don't have a SIM plan that has much data, for example. But it's just going to be a long time until things like that can run on device. And yeah, D1360VR pointing out that this feature right now, to be crystal clear, is all about accessibility. This is for accessibility, to be clear.
You know, going back to the AI assistant thing, I think I made this joke on the game show, but I've got to repeat it here. Or maybe we did it at the end of our last show, David. I don't remember. But if you take a phone and just put it in a holder, outward facing, whether it's your top pocket on your shirt or a sling that you wear on, like with a water bottle holder, whatever. But as long as your camera on your phone is facing outward forward, scanning your environment, you have all the processing power, all the functionality you need to do all this stuff right in your pocket. And over the span of time, having that cellular-based processing center right in your pocket is going to be such an important thing. Like, you're right about device, David, right? Where you want the glasses to do it on its device. But before we get the glasses able to do all this translation directly on it, you're still going to need a local center. And for now, that's Android and iPhones as your local processing center, nothing else.
Yeah, phones will be able to do it on device long before glasses can. But, to be clear, I don't think you're going to have to strap your phone to your chest. I think your glasses are going to leverage your phone as compute, but the input from visuals are still going to be your glasses, right? We've seen Qualcomm show off this like AR2 chip solution that we haven't seen any any headset used yet. I don't believe any glasses used yet, sorry, but they have this concept where there are actually 3 chips in the glasses. They're all called AR2 together, but one of them is dedicated to communicating with your phone. Another one is dedicated to doing the visual processing on board because you want that to be really low latency and right beside the sensors. And then I can't recall exactly what the third one is for. I think it's doing for some basic onboard tasks. And that's the model we're going to see. We're going to see compute split between devices. Your phone or your compute puck does the really heavy lifting stuff and then beams it up to your glasses, and then all your glasses beams down is just like the tasks that it needs to get done.
Fascinating stuff for us to think about as we progress into the future. We've got a lot of product. There's a lot of products that still have yet to be announced this year. So there's going to be a lot of surprises in store through the rest of the year. Ready to talk about the next Vision Pro subject about Immersed. I don't know if I'm going to use Immersed. I was very excited to use it on Vision Pro. I'm even in the test flight. I installed the streamer app and I looked at it, and then you pointed out one very, very, very big drawback to it compared to some other solutions. Do you know which one I'm referring to?
Yeah, just very quickly, I wanted to show this picture that I was trying to bring up where you have this approach that Qualcomm has for. So everyone knows that the XR2 series is what you have in headsets. The AR1 series chips is what you have in the Ray-Ban Meta glasses, really low power. And this is the AR2 from Qualcomm, where the phone does the heavy lifting. There's a dedicated connectivity chip to communicate with the phone. There's a sensor chip that does the computer vision stuff on board, and then you have like a basic AR processor over here. And the really clever thing about doing this in 3 chips is that you distribute the thermals, right? So you don't have to have all the heat in one place. You have the thermals distributed across the glasses.
All right, here's a problem. Okay, it's time for us. We've got to talk about Immerse now. David's just given us this rundown. But I've just put together a mystery here. It's David's power, okay? David's power is at 13% over there, and his reality is fading, okay? We're going to lose David Heaney here in the studio here, okay? If he doesn't get his battery fixed. But our audience heard the power down. I heard the power down, and you effed with all of our realities, David, because we all wondered if we were running out of power in that moment, David.
That is the most esoteric way I've ever heard of hearing a battery low indicator noise. But yeah, sure. Let's talk about Immersed for Apple Vision Pro, because yeah, you're right to say that while there are some big advantages to it and it solves a big problem, there are also a lot of trade-offs there that I did point out when it comes to how it actually works in practice. So if you have a Vision Pro or you've read about Vision Pro, you'll know that one of the really cool features is the ability to do Mac virtual display, where it takes your MacBook and magnifies its screen to a giant virtual screen that gives you a much bigger screen real estate than just being limited to your 13-inch, 14-inch, 15-inch MacBook. With Immersed, this app that's been around for Quest and Vive Focus for years, what you can now do instead is have extra virtual monitors. Instead of just this one, you can have up to 5, 3 for free. So that's your real monitor extended plus 2 virtual ones. And you get up to 5 if you pay $50 as an in-app payment. So that gives you 2 extra ones. So in total, then you would have 1 physical monitor magnified to a virtual monitor plus 4 extra virtual monitors. And so that sounds really great in theory, doesn't it, right? You've just turned your little 13-inch laptop into a 5-monitor setup just by carrying around a Vision Pro in your backpack, right? Sounds absolutely great. The problem is in practice, it does not work anywhere near as well as the built-in version. The biggest difference is that Apple's built-in Mac Virtual Display is kind of cheating in a way, because what it does is something that other apps can't do. It creates a direct Wi-Fi connection between the headset and the laptop. If you're using something like Virtual Desktop or Steam Link or Quest Link, it's going through your home Wi-Fi network, right? You're going from your PC or laptop to your router to the headset, and it's doing all of those hops and competing with all those devices. What happens when you do Mac Virtual Display is it creates a Wi-Fi direct connection from the headset to the Mac. And that's in addition to the regular Wi-Fi connections that both of these headsets are having to the internet. And there's no configuration. You're not setting up a bridge or any of that nonsense. It's just one click and it all magically works. An example of where Apple's ecosystem integration is at its absolute best. It just works. And what you get then is incredibly low latency, incredibly high quality screen mirroring that's better than you get in Horizon Workrooms, better than you get anywhere else unless you've manually done a network setup that gives you a direct connection with your PC, which you can do manually on Windows. But I would wager 99.9% of people neither have the time nor knowledge to pull off. And it's also finicky a lot. Guy Godin says, I don't think a Wi-Fi direct connection is the reason for the performance difference here. I mean, I respect your opinion, but we've seen Apple talk about saying that that's the reason. It's pretty clear to me that that's the reason. Also means I can take it on a plane, right? And it doesn't matter if the plane has Wi-Fi. It just connects. I have a Wi-Fi direct connection. It just works. I look at my Mac and it's there. You can be in, it does not matter what your internet connection is. It doesn't matter what your router is. Your router could explode. It could be thrown out the window and this will still work. And I said it in my review of Vision Pro, the Mac Virtual Display is the best screen mirroring I've ever seen at all. And so with Immersed, you don't get that. It's going through your regular home Wi-Fi network. And unfortunately, because of that, you get a lower latency, you get a higher latency, you get lower quality. They also seem to have the gamma wrong for some reason. Like the gamma is just not correct. The other issue is foveated rendering. So I pointed this out also in my Vision Pro review. There is an issue in Unity where the foveated rendering is really noticeable. So I'm looking over at this monitor and I can see all of these monitors flickering like hell, really, really noticeable. And that's something that Unity has said they're working on, but it's clearly not being solved yet. The other thing is positioning of virtual monitors is really janky. With Vision Pro, you normally just kind of pinch and use your eyes and put them in place, and it feels almost like telekinesis. It's just the screens move where you want them to. I've never been in Vision Pro and thought that's just not moving right. And you don't realize how hard it was for Apple to pull that off and what the real underlying magic there is until you try a third-party implementation. And the final issue, which is the one Ian hates the most, is that it runs in a full space. To do all this, Immersed is its own full space app, which means you cannot run Vision OS or iPad OS apps alongside it.
So, Guy, in the comments saying it comes down to the quality of the implementation. That's, I think, fair, right? I mean, that's so a couple things that I've encountered. So one of the ridiculous things I tried doing with my Vision Pro was streaming a Switch screen over my Wi-Fi through a wall. And I've been thinking I want to get, we talked about this before, but it's one of the coolest darn things you can do with a Nintendo Switch is you go and get the little AR car, Mario Kart or Luigi car, and actually feel like you're driving around that Mario Kart all around your floors. It's fantastic to do with the Switch. But going back to go back to the Wii U, Nintendo had to go and basically manage the connection between the Wii U and the console in order to make sure that felt low latency enough for you to really enjoy a console gaming experience in your hand. And here we are, how many years later from that, and you've got PlayStation Portal trying to recreate that experience, and Guy Godin out there doing the same darn thing in a completely different way for VR experiences, but for games and flat screen games. And at the end of the day, we're moving to a future where you're going to be wanting to stream multiple 1080p 4K sized streams around your house from room to room for various reasons in various ways all the time. And when we're talking about whether we're using Wi-Fi direct or not, are we still going to have that problem 3 years from now where, son, get off the PC. You're hogging the Wi-Fi. Are we going to be yelling upstairs because of that?
Yeah, I think the Wii U is a great example of another thing that used a direct connection to solve this problem. And I saw some of the reviews of the PlayStation Portal say this thing it works doesn't work as well as the Wii U, which is crazy given the Wii U's limited technology. And an example, and I didn't think this would be controversial, but I think a big problem here with the debate of is it Wi-Fi direct or is it fine to use the home network is that people live in very different scenarios, right? If you live on your own and you're the only person using your router, so you go into VR and it's just you and your PC, sure, maybe to you, especially if you've got a smaller home with thin walls, it doesn't really matter that you're on it. But let's be real, like the scenario that a lot of people in is that they're in a family of 5 or 6 people who are all using this one router for a bunch of different devices through thick walls all the time, all of these signals competing, congesting together on the network. And so if you then take that out of the equation and just put a direct connection that's going over literally a meter distance from you to the laptop, of course there's going to be a dramatic difference in that sort of scenario. And people are pointing out that you can use a direct Wi-Fi connection with Immersed. Mark Seymour's pointing that out, and I actually tried it, and I found that that solved a lot of the problems. The difference is that you have to do that manually. It's a quite involved setup process on both Mac OS and Windows to do that, and I don't think the vast majority of people would do that. The difference in just like, I don't know if people realize that they don't have a Vision Pro. You look at your MacBook screen and there's a little icon that pops up above it in AR. It tracks your MacBook. You see the icon and you select it and boom, that's it. It's done. It's one of the most magical integrations of hardware and software I've seen in a very, very long time. And it works very, very well. I think Moore had another comment here I wanted to bring up saying that, yeah, the other huge advantage of this is that you can use it on Windows, right? The built-in Mac Virtual Display is a Mac Virtual Display. If you have a Vision Pro and a Windows PC, Apple will not let you connect to that. Sure, there are plenty of third-party apps that you can get on the App Store that will do it, and Immersed is an example of one of those.
Including what Steam Link. The Steam Link being one of those apps that plays well with others, so you can have it in your space alongside everything else. And then, of course, you've got access to your desktop inside of Steam Link, which I've accessed almost accidentally inside of VR from time to time because it's like a layer hidden underneath the Steam OS. But you can, like, that's the killer feature to me, at least using Vision Pro, is to have not just the Mac, but also the PC, and then also all my other apps around me from the headset itself. So let's talk about Guy's comment here. We should probably start moving on here quickly as soon as we can. But Guy saying a desktop stream has 15 milliseconds of latency on Quest 3 today. It takes about 10 megabits per second of bandwidth. The issue with Immersed is their implementation of the capture network stack and the decoding rendering headset side.
Sure, but I mean, the experience on Vision Pro is dramatically better than any app on Quest 3, including of the virtual desktop. And to be clear, again, we're not saying there's not enough bandwidth. It's in ideal network conditions, sure. The problem is most people don't live in that. As I just said, the people are having 5 other people in the house that are using it. The issue that it comes down to is congestion and signal attenuation as you're going through 3 brick walls and 5 other people are trying to use 10 other devices as well. Like people are not, the vast majority of people are not sitting out here with like a $200 router they got and configured. They're sitting there with the basic router that their ISP gave them, that their ISP picked because it was the cheapest tender that they got from some Chinese company. There's a massive, massive difference between the ideal networking scenario that the typical power user has and what a real person has in a family home. And that's why a direct Wi-Fi connection is so ideal for a scenario like this. And it's why Apple picked it, right? It's why Apple did it for Vision Pro.
Yeah, and I'm going to go back here. David is speaking my language here, right? I've got an editorial that's half written that I need to finish up where we're traffic. We're quite literally discussing traffic again in the year 2024, except the traffic happens inside of our homes. It happens between our devices instead of our cars. And it's stupid and it sucks and it's going to be with us for the near future because of exactly what he's talking about, congestion and devices talking to each other. And it's like, that's what I just described. Hey kid, are you on the Wi-Fi, right? Are we really going to have that situation? Because he's using the Wi-Fi direct connection, and now I need to use the Wi-Fi direct connection, and our stupid router over there can only handle one Wi-Fi direct connection to a device at a time. Like,
To be
that's,
clear, no,
yeah,
the Wi-Fi Direct means you don't go through the router, right? Wi-Fi Direct is the headset connects to the laptop and
up
it
to
never
what
touches the
length,
router.
what distance?
It depends on the transmit part of the device. It's designed to be in the same room, right? If you're using a laptop, it's sitting in front of you, right? Like, look at this picture. You're sitting with a laptop 10
All right,
meters
so
or a meter in
did
front
we
of you.
just did we just challenge Guy Godin into creating a virtual desktop app for Vision Pro? I hope we did, because I want virtual desktop on Vision Pro yesterday.
I
Guy,
think
I want it.
I think he announced that we have an article about
Wait,
Vision. Yeah, we reported that
I'm not
before.
on the test flight. Guy, I want to be on the test flight.
Well, I don't think he's testing it. I think he announced that he was building it, or planned to build it.
All right.
But
Well,
yeah,
Guy,
please do.
please.
But again, I've tested this where you can take an app and try it on Wi-Fi Direct and try it on network. But again, let's not have this debate over and over again. I just think enthusiasts vastly underestimate the kind of network scenarios that real families live under.
This is going to be it's going to be I don't think anybody realizes how many problems in the household are caused by poor network congestion. Like, how many little, like, how much nightmares are happening. Like, it's what's the old Twilight Zone episode? The monsters are doing Mulberry Street or something. It's almost like that with your Wi-Fi router, with things going wrong on it and causing problems. And I don't
Yeah.
appreciate you, David, living on your own, not having experienced this.
We have a comment here from Mike saying a simple $120 Unify AP can handle, band steering and not have those issues. You're absolutely right. Yeah, for $100 to $200, you could solve this problem. The problem is, for an average family, if you tell them don't use their ISP router, firstly, they'd have no idea that's even a thing. They'd be like, what do you mean? You can use a different router? What? Since when? And then if you say for $120, they just look at you like you're crazy. Like, why on earth would I replace my router for $120? So yeah, just again, I find very, very fascinating technology. The vast difference between enthusiasts and regular person usage. It's always been one of my interests when it comes to technology. Yeah, Wobble, you're absolutely right to say it's not even real congestion. It's just cheap routers, but that's what ISPs give people. They give people the cheapest router so that they can offer the cheapest prices, which is what the vast majority of people pick their provider on. But yeah, let's talk about the next piece of Vision Pro news. I think it's the last piece of Vision Pro news. I've seen some people in our comments beforehand a little frustrated that we talk about Vision Pro so much. I mean, it's the one thing I'd respond to that. This isn't our live comments, to be clear. This is on some of our post-show comments. Is that Vision Pro has been out for 3 months. Apple is the biggest technology company in the world, one of the biggest companies in the world. I think was the richest company in the world for a short time, maybe still is. Their entry into this industry is obviously fascinating. So we're going to have to talk about it if there's news, but we're not going to talk about this one for a long time. It's just that Bloomberg's Mark Gurman, who has been very, very reliable about Meta and Apple's moves in this space, is reporting that Apple is preparing to sell Vision Pro outside of the US. So Apple is training retail workers for their Apple stores from Germany, France, Australia, Japan, South Korea, Singapore, and China. And so Gurman previously reported that Apple was training US retail workers in mid-January, and then on February 2nd, Vision Pro launched. So there is if we assume the same kind of delay, we should expect that at the end of this month or in early June, Vision Pro becomes available internationally.
Yeah, I think we've really triggered some of our audience on the networking issue. A lot of nightmare scenarios brought up for a lot of people, and really realizing that it is a universal experience to realize that you really should upgrade your router if you care about not having those problems. And then I like Onakazi's comment here saying that they finally demoed the Apple Vision Pro yesterday. They said it was nice, but they are out of their minds thinking the single back strap is enough for that headset. We want to move on here, David? We got to get through the rest of this episode.
Yeah, I don't think there's much to say about this one, just that it's going to be in more countries. I did note in the article, all of these countries except for Singapore have a lower GDP per capita than the US. So that's going to be a big affordability issue. all of them except China have a lower population. So this probably won't move the needle on Vision Pro sales, but it's an obvious next move for Apple. And I just want to hard agree with Onakazi that, as I said in my review, I think Apple is fully aware that the single backstrap isn't enough. That's why they include another one in the box, right? How often does Apple include something for free in the box? The fact that they did that to me tells me they are fully aware. As I said in my review, I think that that default Vision Pro strap is there because it looks better in marketing shots and it looks cooler and it looks futuristic. But the dual loop strap is what people actually need to use for it to be comfortable. A huge majority of Vision Pro users, I imagine, end up using it over the long term. And this is one of the things where I'm sure the design and marketing departments had fierce debates with the kind of product engineering departments. I would almost be sure about that. Barkay Dub is asking, oh no, what about the UK? That list is not extensive. This is just that Gurman has had sources telling him that people from these countries are being trained. There may be other people from other countries that are being trained. They may be doing them in batches. It would be hard to imagine Vision Pro not coming to the UK, but maybe not. Who knows?
I want you to talk about UltraLeap Hyperion, just because I think it's cool the way you say UltraLeap Hyperion. Doesn't freak me out like the way you say skeletal. But why don't you talk about this? Because the way you wrote about it was pretty clear. This is already market standard leading hand tracking technology that's even getting better. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. So I got to try this out at CES 2022. That's over 2 years ago now in January. And I think I have an image here of me testing this out on two different headsets. Yes, this was the previous version of their software, Gemini. 2 years ago, I tried out and I found that it was a much higher quality hand tracking experience than even what we have today on Quest 3 and Vision Pro. So the fact that they are now releasing a new version, Hyperion, suggests that they have made, as I said, as my headline, the best hand tracking tech even better. And so if you know about the Leap Motion controller from back in the day, this company bought Leap Motion, UltraLeap, if you haven't been following them in recent years. And they recently brought out the Leap Motion controller 2, which you can attach to any headset and use. And so to be clear, like because of the software situation here, this is really only used by enterprise. This isn't really for consumers. So you technically could get a Leap Motion 2 and stick it on your PC VR headset and use it for VR chat, especially when they have that new skeletal hand tracking update coming soon. I had to use the word just to irk Ian. See him laughing away there.
This is the shaking. I was trying to get the shake across.
Shaking. Okay.
Yeah, I was trying to. Yeah. There was some. The thing about UltraLeap. So he mentioned UltraLeap. So there was a separate company that did haptics, hands-free or wireless haptics, but you could only get it about this far away from the hardware. And it's killed me, David, for years here. This idea that like, if you could ensure that your hand tracking is great just from looking around, and then you equip an environment with a whole bunch of the UltraLeap sensors, you could have a remarkably like incredible experience with custom built software. So like you could go around and feel things in the environment with the little touchpads that Ultra Haptics does. It was a great idea, but like, have you heard of anyone using this technology in really major ways?
Hold on, to be clear, you're talking about their completely separate product here, the haptics thing, right? The in-air haptics.
Well, that's when they merged the two companies, it was UltraLeap and Ultra Haptics, or Leap Motion and Ultra Haptics,
yes,
right?
But to be clear, this is nothing to do with that. Like that those sort of haptics are very expensive. To be clear to the audience, what we're even talking about, these kind of they can use ultrasound and sometimes air to create like a haptic in-air effect, but it's only over like a small pad and it's very expensive. It's not something that they're using for VR as far as I'm aware. It's for like very limited applications.
Yeah, well, location-based experiences or custom-built attractions like at Disneyland or at Universal Studios seem like a really cool use case for that part of their work. but it hasn't surfaced. I've been looking for it, waiting
It's
for.
very low volume, like
Yeah.
physical volume. It's not like I tried it out. It's just very like limited to a very small space. It's not what you're imagining, and it obviously can only come from one angle. It's not like you can have things with your hands like this. It's not limited. But yeah, to go back to the hand tracking here, this one of the reasons I think some people don't like hand tracking is because it isn't full quality. And I think there is a difference between 90%, like we maybe have on Quest 3 today. I'm using a Quest 2 right now to be clear. So, there's more jank here than there is on a Quest 3. But even on a Quest 3, right? Unless you're in ideal lighting, hand tracking is still a little bit janky. Let's say Quest 2 is 80% and Quest 3 is 90%. There is a massive difference in going from 90% to 99%. If you are in a future headset where you know that your hands are tracked perfectly, right? And you just, no matter what way you move them, they're always ready to go. So you never hit the wrong UI element because your hand tracking got shaky, and you never like drop a virtual object. That makes hand tracking a lot more compelling than it does today. And I really have said this before, and I maintain a lot of the resistance to hand tracking is resistance to shitty hand tracking. And that's one of the reasons that I really, really enjoyed my UltraLeap Gemini demo 2 years ago, and why I'm optimistic about this new Hyperion. So let's talk about what's actually changed. To be clear, this is not new hardware. This is still using this same Leap Motion 2 attachment that you can see here on a Vive Focus 3 and here on a Pico headset. It's I think that's the Pico Neo 3 Link. What's changed here is they say it can now track finger movements down to the millimeter to enable subtle micro gestures. It can also do marker tracking and gives developers direct access to the infrared cameras. And it also adds 2 new power modes. So in addition to the regular power mode, they have a high power mode and a low power mode. So the high power mode is for when you're using it on a headset with a really big battery or on a PC where you want to throw all the compute you can to get the highest quality possible hand tracking available. And then the low power mode is so it can be used in like slim headsets and glasses. The other thing they've improved is the robustness when your hand is holding a physical object. You can see that in the center here. They've made it work really, really well when you're holding a real object to continue to grab, to track your hands. So micro gestures, hand on object tracking, AR marker tracking. This is something where if you're a business right now and you want to build a VR experience that uses hand tracking and you really care about getting the best hand tracking, you're going to want to use UltraLeap's technology with Hyperion. You're not going to want to rely on Quest 3's hand tracking. I suspect that Vision Pro could do hand tracking of this level on the system level, but for some reason it doesn't give developers that hand tracking. This is something developers have really complained about. The hand skeleton that a developer gets in Vision Pro is, I think, something like 30 hertz, but it's very obvious in the system shared space that Vision Pro is doing much faster hand tracking than that under the hood. And it's puzzling. Why does Apple not give developers full quality hand tracking despite the hardware being ostensibly capable of it?
A couple things, like a couple answers, potential answers I can think of to that. I don't want to speculate on the wrong one, but the thing I'm wondering, David, is any of those partners for Horizon OS headsets, would they be free to lop on a Leap Motion UltraLeap unit to do a better tracking than is built in? Could they partner on different hardware than the one system that is approved by Meta
It's a
for
very good
tracking?
question. I think one of the things that makes this work so well is that it has an IR illuminator on, right? So that it's constantly, even in darkness, giving your hands, like keeping them very, very well illuminated, so that because it's actually a very short distance IR illuminator, it means your hands are dramatically high contrast compared to the background. I don't think there's any reason that you couldn't do that on a Horizon OS headset, put on an IR illuminator. When it comes to actually integrating this literal technology, UltraLeap, I don't think that's going to happen, right? Meta is not going to bother supporting that. You would have to have it somehow replace the Quest's hand tracking API, and that's not something that is very likely. For people asking in the comments about the hertz, the refresh rate, this is 115 hertz. The UltraLeap hand tracking goes up to that. And I think Quest is 50 or 60 hertz in high frequency mode. So Quest actually gives developers an option. Do you want more stable, less jittery 30 hertz tracking, or do you want higher quality 50 or 60 hertz tracking? And so developers get to choose what they want. If you go to the fast motion demo on App Lab, you can actually try this out where there's a 60 hertz tracking mode and you can do like boxing in Quest, and it's pretty good, but 115 hertz just blows that out of the water, obviously.
Yeah, I think that was why I was bringing up the weird sort of end use case idea back at the beginning. Was you're talking about high quality hand tracking being, all these, we dealt with it earlier in our show. People say I'm going out on a limb here saying that hand tracking is going to win out, where at the same time we're kind of dealing with this issue of what hand tracking just isn't good enough yet to convince people that it's going to win out. And I think there were some rumors or some suggestion that, like, did you ever hear this suggested that Leap Motion was considered for Apple Vision Pro and then not used? Did you hear that floated at some point? I thought I heard that.
I heard it floated. I don't think they were. I think the idea was that they were looking at acquiring them. Quite a few companies were looking at acquiring Leap
It's a
Motion.
target, right? Because of how good and important its technology is.
So with the UltraLeap merge, that obviously went out the window.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's where I'm going with this, David, is like, it seems like you've got one of the industry's best technologies here that really is an add-on that shouldn't be an add-on, right? Like this, and you could have a fantastic series of experiences with this built in as your like hand-on object, right? If you build your entire operating system around that basic interaction, you're good to go on a ton of stuff. But this is still an ad, like it's almost like they're shooting themselves in the foot by not getting this on more systems.
Yeah, I mean, I think these companies are all going to invest heavily in hand tracking, right? I would be shocked if Quest 4 doesn't have like an IR illuminator on the front to try and do better hand tracking and higher refresh rate cameras. I think getting these headsets to have better hand tracking is going to be a huge focus for Apple and Meta. Where for Apple, it'll be they're trying to bring down the cost that they can do good hand tracking on, because it already does have IR illuminators, to be clear. Vision Pro does have IR illuminators. With Meta, it's going to be about bringing the quality up while not reducing cost. Not increasing cost. But I'm confident that like by Quest 4, they're going to have a lot of this up to the same quality.
I wonder how much Disney would pay for a company like this. Right? Like I know they're positioning themselves as a supplier of many different technology companies, but again, I want to paint that example of the thing that David is talking about, that like. I know that David wants to talk about the hand tracking, but the ultra haptics part of this is such a cool thing that works in such a limited way that I wish more people could experience and try, and like I wish it got in more places than. I wish the hand tracking itself, I wish the Leap Motion part of this was used in more places. But again, it seems like we go to tech demos and conferences to see this hand tracking rather than getting it out onto consumer hardware.
Well, I think they are, again, yeah, consumer hardware, sure, but they are used in enterprise, right? A lot of the technology we talk about when we're talking about advanced tech, it's not that it doesn't get used, it's just that it doesn't get used in the consumer space. In the consumer space, it's all about cost, it's all about power consumption, all of these things that have to be taken into account. And then in the enterprise space, it's like they don't care about the price as long as it does what they need it to do, right? If you're talking about like a giant conglomerate, they couldn't care less if it adds $200 to the BOM cost or whatever. That just isn't a problem at all. And if their situation, if their 45-minute training means that they have to replace the battery on the headset each time, no problem. The Vive Focus 3 has these swappable batteries, right? And that one of their unique features that Enterprise uses, so that if something is so power consuming, it takes out the whole headset's battery. Who cares? You've got 5 batteries ready to go. Swap it in and let's go to the next person. Let's get the training done. It's a very different world.
Yeah, let's talk about Holoride here and get to the last section on Meta after that. Holoride, I wrote that story and reached out to the founders there, and they were very forthcoming, getting me a comment across the Atlantic divide as well as the platform divide, forcing me to install WhatsApp in order to contact the founders there and get a comment. Yeah, I know, right? I had to step out of my North American shell here and step into the wider world and got this comment, and it's a very interesting thing. So for those who aren't familiar, Holoride is a Germany-based startup that has a very interesting idea to enable you to use and play VR games, use a VR headset while in the backseat of a moving vehicle. So they had a product in market to pipe into an actual car, get some of its location data, collate that, do sensor fusion more or less of a different kind, and give you a VR experience that's mapped to your world as you drive through it. Kyle and myself have gotten demos of this. They drove me around in a car in Las Vegas with games, custom-made games that they had made for this system from big-name developers to prove out the concept. Very interesting idea, and then they've had to file for insolvency over there in Germany. And reaching out to them, getting the comment, we ran the full statement from them to us. There's a timing issue here, right? So Apple Vision Pro just launched with travel mode, MetaQuest. We've got some news coming up on that right after this. Travel mode is an obvious thing that you need VR headsets to do. And the stuff that I remember joking with Google. There's a PR rep at Google who was the PR rep that we always contacted for Daydream Stories. And that PR rep got reassigned to go work on Google's self-driving car project. And I remember when they got reassigned, joking with them, "Oh, just wait around long enough. We'll go full circle, and we'll have to do the VR in your self-driving cars eventually." I don't know if that's going to happen with Google, but this is an eventuality we need. We're going to need to have this function in future headsets. But Holoride has filed for insolvency. The thing with my comment and reaching out to them is they don't necessarily think that's the end of the story for them. They are trying to reform, I think, and get a new management ownership structure in place to revisit this idea and try to come at it maybe a different way. But right now, this seems like a plan that is on life support at the very best way of framing it.
Yeah, I think the coolest thing about this was that it's not just that it was a travel mode, it's that these apps and games for this were all specifically designed for the car. So you're actually driving through the game world as the car is driving because it links into the car's own sensors. The car is able to use its wheels and its, IMU to know where it's driving. And that's the magic of this. So that theoretically, at least, you shouldn't be able to get motion sickness. Though I do see someone in the comments saying that, yeah, exactly. Yeah, that they said that they did get motion sickness. I'd say that's probably down to them using the Vive Flow, which is a very limited low power headset. You can see my review of that on UploadVR.com. I don't
That's
think
brutal. That's brutal. I mean, like I'm looking at this going, what's David gonna say? Is he gonna crap on this piece of hardware he didn't try? And no,
well, I've
he
tried
did
the
not.
Flow. I've tried the Flow. I
You
reviewed
crapped
it.
on the piece of hardware you did try, right?
Yeah. I mean, I got sick using the Flow completely stationary, so I can't imagine how bad it would be in a moving vehicle. I don't think the concept here was bad. You can imagine that if they were using this with a different, more advanced headset these days, it might be a little bit different. Eric Hartley also pointing out that there was a pixel ripped game for this exclusive to it and a Schnell Games title. So they had the right idea. That's a really cool concept to be in your car and driving through so that you see what you feel, right? Because VR sickness is fundamentally that what you see disagrees with what you feel. You're in a VR game, you push forward in the thumbstick and you're moving through the world, but your inner ear doesn't feel that you're moving. You're just standing in your living room, right? So if you are in a car and the car is moving, and you're moving through a virtual world, all of these games are designed around that concept that you're in like a virtual car or a virtual vehicle of some sort, or even, just like a floating cloud that's moving in the same way as your car. It's a really, really cool idea. I think the business model is obviously really challenging here. This was like for one brand of car in one country, you would need some sort of like open standard that all car manufacturers easily allow. You would ideally also want it to be wireless rather than having to go through USB. On a software level, it feels like this shouldn't be like yes, you could use any Flow, but it feels like this should be an app, right? There should be a way that someday you can connect your Quest 3 or your Quest 4 or whatever to your car's Wi-Fi. network that it generates, and then all of that just gets synced automatically. And you open the Holoride app, and all of these games are within that one app. That seems like a much better business model to me, but obviously I have no idea what their actual plans are.
Well, let's go to Starship Home, or my better model, the Magic School Bus, right? Like, it really doesn't matter necessarily that the car gets a perfectly one to one, as long as my head is one to one with the seat, so much. And like, is if you can identify that you're in a car and you can reskin the windows in the world that's beyond the windows, you've got a Magic School Bus. You've got a trip through space that you can put whatever you want on the other side of that window for you in that VR headset. But yeah, David, seeing a lot of people in the comments talk about the Pixel Rip game. So I did try the Pixel Rip game in this demo at CES, and it was the write up. So if you go find our write up on Holoride of that hands-on demo, this was the thing I described. But it was a really cool idea that you are like you're playing a handheld game in the middle seat, I think it was, with your mom and dad up in the front seats of the car, and they're talking as you're driving through a city, and you're able to use this controller in your hands, a completely thematically linked up sequence to where you are in the car versus what you are in the game. But what I'm describing, David, is a little bit of a different sort of interaction with the environment. Like, what you're describing is so many years away. Does the software need to know whether the window is rolled up or rolled down? Does it respond to that? All those things would need to be, I don't know, informing your game design.
Yeah, I think when it comes to mixed reality, where you're still viewing most of the car, you don't really need to have all that car motion linked in it. But when you do come to VR, where your entire view is encapsulated, that's where you do need that car sync that Holoride did, and that's where I think Holoride's tech is beyond what we have in any travel mode, because the travel mode cancels out the motion of the vehicle. But should we go on to talk about the Quest travel mode, or is
Yep.
there anything more you want to? Yeah.
Yeah, these next two things are natural evolutions, and they're all related. So I don't know. You should probably get through those next two things together.
Yeah, 100%. So if you're been under a rock this week, the big VR news is that Quest 2 and Quest 3 now have an experimental travel mode to make positional tracking work on airplanes. Now, Meta says it's only for airplanes, but I've already seen people report that it works on trains, even though Meta has said that that's something that they plan to do in future. So I guess it's one of those things where, like, it works at your own risk, but it might not officially be supported. It's designed for airplanes. But yeah, this is something that has been on Vision Pro since launch. I saw Sharon in our comments pointing out that this is one of their favorite things about Vision Pro. If I read your comment correctly, it scrolled past a little bit. And that is great. When I picked up the Vision Pro in New York, I got on a 10-hour flight afterwards, and I used the Vision Pro for the vast majority of it, right? And having that travel mode was absolutely essential, because, to be clear, if you don't know, what happens when you try to use a Quest before travel mode, or any headset that has positional tracking, is that anytime the aircraft increased altitude or decreased altitude or banked or changed speed, or any change other than just steady motion, direction, and speed, you would see all of your virtual objects and windows fly off into the distance in the opposite direction. And so it was a nightmare, right? You have to constantly wait for the motion to stop. Unless you were literally at your cruising altitude, no change, everything's just kind of, perfect autopilot, you would have a nightmare of an experience. It sucked to use a Quest. What you could do is turn off positional tracking, but that also turns off pass-through. So you're left there with 3-off Oculus Go style VR. So when you turn on travel mode now on Quest 2 and Quest 3, this doesn't happen. It is able to cancel out the motion of the aircraft and just keep your virtual objects pinned as they would. It's a 6-off positional tracking, but that doesn't feel in a moving vehicle. So the thing that Meta is claiming that this can do that Apple Vision Pro can't is that Vision Pro's travel mode, when you turn it on, warns you don't look out the window. And I tried it. Obviously the first thing I did was looked out the window, and it broke. It pretty much, it breaks, right? That everything starts to like shift and drift around. So what that tells me, neither of these companies have actually said how their travel mode works, right? Neither has come out and specifically said it. but it it's quite clear how it works. It seems that what it does is it gets the headset to rely more on its visual sensors and less on the accelerometer, so that the accelerometer is telling it that everything is moving when a plane changes any of those things I talked about. But the cameras can see that everything around you, except out the window, is stationary. And so Meta is claiming that theirs will work even when you do look out the window. I'm assuming that they've just, trained it to know what outside a window on a plane looks like and ignore that in the same way that it ignores a TV. Because interestingly, the one way in which Quest 3's positional tracking is noticeably superior to Vision Pro's is that it's better at ignoring TVs. I've been sitting there in a living room with a big TV nearby, and my Vision Pro will occasionally start moving everything in the motion of the what's happening on TV. If it's like a panning shot or whatever, it thinks that what's happening on the TV is real motion. The Quest has never done that. Quest has always been able to say, that's not real, that's a TV. I assume Meta has used machine learning there to train that, and that's what they're doing here.
What's really, David's describing really funny things that you can do when you use these headsets for large lengths of time. You'll walk by something in your house and realize, wait, that something just went, oh, that's what happened. So one of the things that happened with me is I've got a little globe. There's a wooden globe, very small, and I got an outline of it in my Vision Pro experience, like a person was standing there underneath my windows. It saw that globe and thought it was a human head sitting over there, which was a little weird. And there's all sorts of like little things, like if you hold your hands up like this, you can make a little space for the computer vision not to see through. And so you can like create a window to see the world through your computer vision, through a little hole in your hands sometimes. And to David's point, like the computer vision on Meta system may have a different list of priorities than the list of priorities for the other system.
I think it's just they've had more time, right? Because Meta has had an inside-out tracking system deployed in the real world with many users since 2019, right? They've had 5 years. One of the first things that they had an issue with in the first Christmas of Rift S and Quest, if I remember correctly, was Christmas trees, right? So one of the issues was that the headset would confuse the flashing lights on your Christmas tree for your touch controllers. And so they actually had to train the system specifically to ignore that. And I think it's just one of those things where over time, as it started on Quest and Rift S with most of the computer vision being handcrafted, classic OpenCV, handcrafted algorithms. And over time, they've added more and more machine learning into it. And over time, it's been just like you see in self-driving cars, where they started to be very handcrafted, and machine learning has eaten up a lot of that handwritten code. And now today, the whole approach is to try to do everything end-to-end neural. You're seeing that same thing in VR tracking at Meta, at least, where more and more of all of that handcrafted code is getting eaten up by these neural networks that are just capable of saying, that's not part of your room, that's your TV, that's not your touch controller, that's a Christmas tree, because this is what they've been taught to do. And now, clearly with this, that's not your headset moving, that's outside the airplane window. So I'm going to be testing this at the end of the month. On May 31st, I'll be taking a flight and bringing my Quest 3 and Vision Pro, and I'll swap in and out. And
two headsets in one backpack. Oh, I've done that. I walked around with Vision Pro in my backpack over the weekend. Didn't use it a single time, but now I've got an intimate knowledge of how damn heavy that thing is to lug around. Yeah, let's talk about this next thing, which is related, right? Like this is going to be what Meta does with this feature, right?
Yeah, so this is enabled.
So Meta, how do you pronounce this flight company? Lufthansa?
Yeah, I believe it's Lufthansa. So it's Germany's flag carrier. It's their, flagship airline. And so they have announced that using this travel mode, they're going to trial giving business class passengers a Quest 3 for the duration of selected flights this summer. So this is not economy. Obviously, this is if you're in business class on certain flights, they're going to hand you a Quest 3 that is preloaded with apps. It's not just like, figure this out yourself and go download whatever you want. This is going to be like a streamlined launcher that has these ready to go experiences for you. And let me just have a quick look here in my notes to see what those experiences are. So one of them will be enjoy an immersive cinema experience, where it's obviously hooking into the same movies and TV shows server that a typical aircraft has these days that you can access in the back of the seat. You'll be able to access those in your headset. Another will be listen to prominent travel podcasters and see their stories come to life through spatial videos and select 360-degree video content. Another will be discover your travel destination from a bird's eye view and with virtual sightseeing previews. So where you're traveling to, you can, in the headset, have a look at before you go there, plan out your trip. Another will be interactive games like chess and Connect 4. And another will be a meditation experience. So a streamlined launcher, you put this on your head, it's all ready to go. This will be interesting. I'm really, really interested to see, will they publicly talk about the results of this trial? Because it's, and you're saying no already. Probably not, but I do think headsets are ideal for long distance flights, right? Like if you're doing an hour or two flight, maybe don't bother. But I've done plenty of these, 10 or 12-hour flights over to America now, and having the headset on is a game changer. Being able to just you're stuck in this seat. Anyone in the comments who's been on one of these flights knows how much it sucks. If you're in first class, okay, whatever, maybe it doesn't suck. But if you're in economy class like me, it probably sucks. And being able to just put on a headset and be in my own personal cinema screen with my own personal theater with all the movies I've pre-downloaded and access to the planes movies and all of the VR games. For example, Cubism. I've played Cubism on a plane multiple times now. Well, it was actually when I was testing Quest 3 on a plane. I was able to play it when the aircraft was at cruising altitude and nothing changed for a solid, 15 minutes or so. This was a very short flight and it was great. I really, really enjoyed playing Cubism on a flight. And I think this is an ideal form of for VR headsets. And I imagine that in the next 10 years, we're going to see this get more and more common. It's going to be a lot more common every year to look around in your flight and see a bunch of people with headsets on.
That was the answer to my question. So David's sort of question of will we hear the results of the test, I think are going to play out in whether they continue the test. Like that's ultimately this is either going to overtake the airline or not, right? Because what David's pointing out is you're going to start very soon to see a lot of other people that are just naturally wearing a headset on the plane with movies that are downloaded for them to watch. I mean, think about that even on our phones, David. It is a pain in the butt to remember to download the 3 hours of content you want to watch on the plane before you actually get to the airport. Plenty of people do it, but it's a pain. You have to remember all that and be part of your whole travel process. And it's even harder with a VR headset. Like you're putting that much more layers up there, but people are learning. It's getting more and more common.
One of the real complementary technologies here is going to be low altitude satellite swarms like Starlink. We've seen a couple of airlines such as JSX start to put Starlink on their aircraft. And the people who have tried it have reported it is such a game changer, right? You go from having like a 1 or 2 megabit connection to having like 100 megabit connection. And that means that you can just then stream, right? You just open up on your Vision Pro, Apple TV Plus or Disney Plus and stream. The biggest issue with this on Quest for now is going to be that Quest just doesn't have these streaming apps yet. But from the sounds of it, this trial at least is going to hook into the movie server that already is being used for the back of the seats, right? You just have like an app that loads that up on your Quest.
Which works, that server works 75% of the time on flights, right? Like that goes out of the.
I've had it work all the time, but maybe it's a different airline thing. But yeah, I mean, the ultimate solution here is that Starlink plus a headset means you no longer are stuck with these tiny little dim behind seat screens. I mean, the thing I said in my Vision Pro review, and I quoted this a few times in this show, is on that flight home from New York, I was in an economy class seat and I had a better movie watching setup than anyone in first class by far.
Just what I want is someone to install like a banter, like pre-install banter or something like that on the headsets, and let me know if people use that on the flight server. I want to know what weirdness happens on a flight where you've got 3 people in headsets and suddenly they're all like messing around and not what's half and half, right? I guess half and half requires you to move around the plane, so that's not going to work. Where's the seat-based hand tracking only VR game for you to play with other people on your plane? Is that what Job Simulator has been working on?
So the other people part is a problem because then you're using your microphone. And already some of the commenters have pointed out here, and I saw this on our Facebook comments for our article, I think, as well. People saying, God, I hope these people use headphones, right? Because if you're using this with the default speakers, people are going to hear. But of course, on a Quest or a Vision Pro, you can just use Bluetooth earbuds. My question is, will they do this for the trial? Obviously, this is just a mock-up image of Mark Zuckerberg wearing a Quest on a plane. This isn't representative, but I would only imagine that they're going to give you headphones because, to go back to our debate last week, unlike the Vision Pro, Quest 3 has a 3.5 millimeter headphone jack, so you can put in any old headphones, and there you go.
Because we let our first class passengers do pretty much whatever they want. Here it is. All right, let's move on to our last subject here today, David. App Lab games, because this is a pretty big one, right?
Yeah, the last thing is I like this comment from CJ7 that the Lufthansa needs to put a 360-degree camera on the top or the bottom of the plane and stream that to the headset. That would be really cool, actually, just being able to like look down and see through the plane. Like one of the features of the F-35 fighter jets HUD is that you can look through the plane, you can look downwards, and the cameras underneath that you like look below you. So that would be really interesting to see, like a mixed reality experience where the floor of the plane disappears and it integrates in like those cameras. That would be pretty cool.
Oh yeah, that's exactly, that would be incredible. You imagine going inside, like that's something we've lost ultimately, right? Like there's some some horror stories and some beautiful stories of people over the years getting to go up into the pilot's chair and seeing what it actually means to be the pilot of an aircraft. And right, that is an experience that has gone away because of various security concerns. And like you could almost literally do that with VR again, right? You could put a camera inside the cabin, and I mean that'd be horrifying. I wouldn't want to be inside that cabin when the worst happens, but on the other hand, I would be pretty cool to have that experience back.
Yeah, I mean, the most meta thing of all, of course, would be meta is in the word, not the company, would be to be playing Flight Simulator in your seat on the flight while you simulate you flying the flight from separately to the pilot. Just you're playing.
You're gonna flight. That's. I mean, is there any use for training in that scenario? Like you could have the training people behind, sat behind the actual pilots and just doing the simulated flight and comparing how they perform to the real pilots in the front seats. Does that work?
Yeah, I think there are probably quite a few issues with that, but
Oh darn it!
they would
Darn
be.
it! I
You
thought
put
I
them in the
invented a
cockpit.
new type of training. All right,
I
I
think you
want
put
to
them
talk
in the
about
cockpit.
App Lab, David.
Yeah, let's talk about that. Our final topic here today. I think we both casted the image at the exact same time, perhaps, or yeah. So the phase one of Meta's opening of the store has begun. So if you missed it when Meta was announcing Horizon OS, the new name for the Quest system software that is coming to third-party headsets, they also said at the same time that they were going to rename the Quest store over time to the Horizon store and make it much more open. So the phase two, I'll describe first, which is not yet. Phase two is their final destination. They're going to merge AppLab into the store. They become one thing with AppLab's open policies. So it works like Google Play or the Apple App Store, where Meta is no longer being like the qualities are and saying, that's not good enough for our store on like a subjective taste basis. They're just kind of letting in anything that doesn't violate their like content policies around, like violence or nudity or whatever, and copyright protection, and has basic technical passing, like it runs, it doesn't run at 2 frames per second, it doesn't crash your headset. As long as it has those basic things, eventually this Horizon store is going to have no concept of App Lab. It's all just the same thing. That's eventually. But phase one was announced as coming first, and phase one is what they have now delivered. So phase one before that is that they have an App Lab section of the store, and App Lab's apps will now show up in search. So there are 100 of the top App Lab apps are now in a section of the store called App Lab. And when you search for an App Lab app in the search, you'll find it. Previously, you had to type its exact name down to the exact character. Even if you had one character off, it wouldn't show up. But now the search system includes App Lab. The other thing is they've taken away the scare pop-up. So when you click on an AppLab app. In the past, you had this big pop up going, AppLab apps are in development and experimental, and they're not rated for use. Blah blah blah. That's gone. There's a little note. There's a little like icon on the page that says AppLab, but it's no longer a scare. So phase one of opening has happened, but phase two, the actual merging into one super more open store, has not begun yet. Has not happened.
App Lab app. Yeah, I hear it too. I like this comment. I want to talk about the last subject here, this Matt Hargett comment. The user acquisition funnel is super interesting in this scenario. So that's talking about the flight. If you can play 2 levels of a game like Tetris Effect, then add to cart with your airline payment based on your seat. Very, very cool idea to think about how you can distribute content. And while you were making that comment, there is the previous show or what we've talked about, uh, what is it, Crossy Road Castle, where the input is this is your joystick, left and right, and then this is your jump button, left, up and down. There's a fair number of games that would be like airline seat type, including maybe even Tetris, right? If you could if you do the down button there too, in order to make the piece fall, you've got everything you need to play Tetris as well. I did ask the Tetris Effect connected people whether they were going to build that for Vision Pro, and they said that there are no plans right now. But I love this whole idea of distributing games directly to your headset on your airline. It's a really cool idea. Back to this larger idea of App Lab games. I saw it in our comments as well, saying this is definitely a game changer. David, we are technically on App Lab, aren't we? But it's still not findable. Is that right?
Kind of, yeah. This is like a pre-release app. We're private on purpose. It's not that it's not that we want to be public. Like, this is a different thing. We're technically on the App Lab system, but we're not like a published App Lab app. But obviously, developers that have a published App Lab app, they want to be seen. They want discoverability. They don't want to be stuck in the situation. And so I'm still really torn about this. And Onakazi in the comments points out the other aspect of this is that they say they're still very worried it will be a race to mediocrity now that App Lab is a part of the main store. Hope I'm wrong. And so that is the trade-off here, right? So the real advantage is that VR's growth from a content perspective is no longer being gated by Meta's quality czars. Whether someone at Meta thinks it's a good idea no longer will matter in the long term, because if you're on the store, the market will decide, right? People will play what they like, and they'll rate what they like, and they'll buy what they like. And over time, theoretically, in an ideal world, that means that the best ideas rise to the top and they have a fair opportunity to compete. Whereas beforehand, getting onto the Quest store was very much so in some ways metric based. Like, if you were successful in App Lab, they would pick you up. But there have been accusations by certain developers that a lot of this was like a friends club kind of thing, where if you knew someone at Meta, you had a much higher chance of launching straight onto the store in the first place, and then you get higher velocity compared to your competitors. And obviously we have not verified whether that's true, but we've seen multiple developers now make that accusation, and that would obviously, even if there's not a favoritism thing, right? Even if there's absolutely none of that, there's still going to be something where a board of 5 people or 10 people are making the decisions that normally the market would make. So that's the positive advantage here. You're now a VR developer. You have a great idea. If you get it published out there onto App Lab, over time, the barriers to people getting to that have been lowered, and you can just, if it's a good idea, it's going to go viral, right? That ability to actually go viral couldn't really happen with the previous model of App Lab. But the disadvantage is that you're going to get a lot of shovelware. There's going to be some diamonds in the rough, but there's going to be a lot of rough too. And that's going to harm the ability of users, of people who own the headsets and buy and use apps to find the best. Because sure, there will be ways of filtering and things like that, but there's still going to be the problem that you have on Steam, which is that every day there's dozens or hundreds of apps published on Steam, and actually finding one that's good has been the grand challenge of Valve over the past 10 years. All of these filtering systems and all of these recommendation systems, all designed to solve the problem that there is a mountain of shovelware between you and what you want to find.
Yeah. I don't even know. What you've just described is such a massive problem, multifaceted, so many different angles to fail in not kind of if you're too restrictive, you keep out good ideas. Uh, if you let too much on there, you immediately devalue all the stuff that you immediately, that you protected in your walled garden over the last few years. I'm going to go a step further and just question all those concerns there in our audience about merging Quest Store content with like all the shovelware questions. Combine that with the push for Horizon Worlds, the idea that you've got a Horizon feed, the idea that worlds or destinations that are a URL away from you visiting rather than a download and a purchase away from you visiting is actually more important to Meta than the sale of $60 VR apps. I think that's where I'm concerned, or where I'm questioning the market and where we are, right? Like there was Half-Life Alyx was 50, I think, at launch. There's a few games here that were late last year, Asgard's Wrath 2, that were up in the, they try to ask for AAA prices for VR games. And we can argue about whether they were successful or not. We've got ratings and we've got lots of people out there ready to debate this stuff, but whether the market can support multiple AAA games built by developers without outside funding footing tens of millions of dollars like to make the game happen. When do we get that? When do we have AAA games that just exist because there's enough gamers to play them? We're still a long ways away from that. And I don't know that any of these trends, any of what Meta just did, helps $60, $70, $80 games exist on the MetaQuest platform. I think it makes $5, $10 games exist on the Quest platform.
Yeah, there's a lot of thoughts there. I think I broadly agree that you're going to get more competition from, as you say, free apps, $5 apps, $10 apps that might make it less appealing for those $60 apps. But as you just said 10 seconds before, we're not in the place where organically studios can put out $60 triple A games yet. So only Meta is doing those. And arguably, as I've mentioned before, their marketing costs for Quest 3, like yeah, they put out Asgard's Wrath 2 and they charged $60 for it, but it was $0 to anyone that bought a Quest 3. It was an incentive to get the hardware in the first place. I think that's just like it's the loss leader, right? It's the hook to get people in the ecosystem, and then you hope that over time they buy 10 $10 apps instead of one $60 app over time, because just like on other platforms with Google Play and the Apple App Store, that's what you saw, right? At the start of these platforms, these were these expensive apps, and over time it trended down and down and down to the point where now apps are a couple of dollars or free, supported by in-app payments. And that's the ultimate model, right? Look at all of the most successful things in gaming right now, whether it be Fortnite, for example. That's the model that they're using, that you get it for free, you get hooked, and then to get more, that's when you get the in-app payments. And we're going to see in VR as well.
Yeah. All right. So I have many thoughts on this, and I will. I invite Andrew Bosworth, Boz Tank, to watch this segment, hear me talk about this, and hear my full thoughts. And any platform holders out there at all to get into this, because games like Beat Saber, Walkabout Mini Golf, and maybe a few others are $100 plus games. You should, could, and would spend $100 plus in those titles if you really love them. You can, if you want to buy every course in that game, if you want to get every song in that library, Rock Band, Guitar Hero, those were games in this category that you would dump hundreds of dollars into between accessories and between content, and you would love it. You would live it. You would live inside that game for months and months and months and years. And there are still plenty of people, probably in our audience today, that still have a Guitar Hero or two sitting in a shelf ready to play on that one machine that has 400 songs installed for their Rock Band or Guitar Hero library. There are games that people will spend hundreds of dollars to play, except what we have here are market forces like Apple and Meta and Google all trying to build like Roblox, right? You've got Roblox, Minecraft, all these companies that are trying to build what you're describing, $1 billion platform, a quadruple, a five, a trip, a 5A game, right? Like they're trying to make a game that can consume all other games because they're going to get all of the profit of all the games that are built on that platform. But you're forgetting that so many other developers need to exist outside of that ecosystem. And you build a great game with legitimate like bespoke DLC content for it on a regular basis. People eat it up again and again and again. Um, what's the game Vampire Survivors just had a Contra DLC. There's all these weird DLCs popping up all over the place inside VR as well that are just people are eating them up. Pinball, right? How much money could you drop into a pinball FX system if you went and added all the DLCs? There's like, I think it's stupid to try to restrict devs, all devs, whether it's Darshan with a big screen or virtual desktop and whatever they want to do, have to have them hand over 30% of whatever they do. You're going to disallow things like this from existing that I'm talking about.
But I mean, there's a lot of thoughts here, but why does I understand in big screen situations specifically why 30% takes away, but surely surely the fact that Meta is hosting this store, right? They are wanting this kind of content. Like, why does it have to be Horizon Worlds and not the store? Why can't it be the store and Horizon World, and these both exist as two different content types?
It's possible, and that's what Meta's going to try to do. But what happens to these other types of content that are trying to exist with, across multiple storefronts, right? Um, how do we really sync up to play? Are we going to be doing room codes in 2030? Is that really how we are going to sync up in every room that there is?
Across platform, sure, but Meta will argue that if its strategy works, the vast majority of headsets out there are going to be running Horizon OS, right? So you just connect with your Horizon OS friends list is what they would hope. Now, obviously, if someone's on an Apple Vision headset, then yes, you're going to have to do something else. You're going to have to either use an account system that you log into each time, or not each time per app, or you're going to have to use something like a room invite code. Yeah, I mean, that is a huge problem. But right now, like if you're talking about playing Walkabout, most people are playing Walkabout from a quest to a quest. So if they did implement, I think they did actually already implement party system. Yeah, they did. I used this recently, right? You're in a party with, you open your quest, you join a party with someone, you click launch together into Walkabout and you're there. There's no nonsense. This idea that you're going across to a different headset, theoretically in a world where we had a bunch of Quest platform competitors, sure, but we don't live in that world. We live in a world where Quest is by far the dominant platform. Horizon OS is probably going to cement that lead even further. And I mean that any competition that would have used a different platform will now be using the Horizon platform other than Samsung's headset, which is relying on the good grace of Google to keep focused on a project for more than a year. And then you have Apple Vision, which doesn't even have the controller to play Walkabout in the first place.
I'm going to disagree on the dominant platform argument there. I'm going to argue that Steam is the dominant platform, but that's
not
going
for
back.
VR. Not for VR.
Well, where do people make games, David?
Well, they make it on a PC. They don't use Steam. They don't use Steam to make the game. They use Unity or Unreal Engine.
Yeah. So, I mean, we could argue Steam is one of those billion-dollar, one of those cash cow gaming platforms that you actually release all other platforms on. But I'm liking the comments saying I have 1,400 Rock Band songs. I appreciate the backup for my point there that, like
I mean,
when
Beat
you've
Saber
gotten
is that for Meta though. Is Beat Saber not already exactly that? You have people who are probably spending hundreds of dollars on Beat Saber DLC.
Oh yeah, no, I'm saying that Meta bought itself one of those games. It was its first game that it bought itself as its chief like representative game in this category, but like there's enough developers building enough things that need to exist outside of a 30% cut, then will be supported inside this ecosystem. And Meta just abandoned almost everything that they were doing here. What I'm going like, so I saw a commenter here saying, I would have spent Asgard's Wrath was totally worth the asking price to them. That was the most time that they spent on that game last year. That's a fantastic point. Totally get it. If you are starved for, deep content on that platform, you got it on Asgard's Wrath too. But what did they do, David? They immediately bundled it with the system. And they did an A/B test while they were doing it between funding as Assassin's Creed externally by another partner and also doing their own game internally. They've lost the founders of Beat Saber. They've lost the founders of uh, the Onward studio. And I'm not seeing a whole, like, Camouflage already had the deal for Batman Arkham Shadow when it got drawn in.
Sure, but what was the scope? What was the scope and funding? Like, you can't argue that that was baked in. They could have cut that at any time. You yourself were the first to pick up in your reporting on the fact that Meta has acquired these 8 game studios, and we're starting to see that come together. Right, Asgard's Wrath 2 is one of those studios. The Batman Arkham
Where
Shadow
do they
game
live?
is another one of those studios.
So do you think all of those studios are going to release their content on the MetaQuest store, or do you think some of them are going to release it on Horizon?
I think some will be Horizon, but it won't be all. I just want to push back against this narrative that there's only one approach. I just think they're going to want to offer both. They're going to want a 30% cut on people who want to spend money in the store. And then in Horizon, they're going to give a completely different model for people who want to do things for free, right? There's some people who they buy their phone or their tablet or their console or whatever, and they almost never will spend any money in the store, right? They just want to see what can they get for free. They will endure on their phone all of the ads and all of the pop-ups as long as they never have to pay a single dollar on a digital format. Because for some people, for some reason, you can go and spend $10 on coffee or $50 on a round of drinks, but the idea of spending $2 on an app is just crazy for some people. I think that's the kind of market they want to address with something like Horizon. They want to have this thing where content can be user generated so that you don't have this massive cost of developing through studios. And then people can go in and they'll have alternative business models over time, right? It might be ads, it might be something else in the very, very long term. And then on the store, that's for the people who will spend money, because it's not that Meta makes its money today on advertising because that's the only revenue stream it wants. I think part of the VR thing is diversification. They want people to actually be paying them money, not just viewing ads. That's one of the key things I think a lot of people get wrong about Meta. They want to have the same business that Google and Apple do, where people pay them real.
They want both. They want both.
Yeah, they want both. Exactly. That's what I'm saying. They want both. And these are two different types of people, right? This idea that, you can, people have always floated the idea, what if Facebook let you pay to have no ads, right? And things like that. But even if it did, right? Let's be real, 99.9% of people wouldn't. 99.9999 probably just wouldn't, right? They would be like, why would I pay for that? They would rather have it for free.
I don't like 99.9% there. I don't like that percentage. I get the overall sentiment there, but we have a company that doesn't do that. We have other companies that don't do that have a different model. And we have a company here in Facebook and Meta that is evolving in real time, trying to be
what company does
like
social media? What company does social media without advertising?
You're turning we're talking about we dealt with this, David, where we argued this was a headset that this is a computer, and Facebook argued it's a social computer. It's a computer you have to talk to your friends on Facebook with, right? And we looked at that and said, come on, man, no, that's not the way this should work. And they backtracked on it, right? They removed the frickin' Facebook connection and made the platform more representative of the way it should be. But
it's still social, right? Like the top game is Gorilla Tag, a social game where you're constantly interacting with other people. The top apps after Gorilla Tag are VR Chat and Rec Room. Horizon World is now in the top 10. If you actually look at what people are using this for, it does prove that thesis. The magic of VR really is in how you can connect with other people. Sure, there are a bunch of people that play single player stuff, but look at that usage chart again. It's Gorilla Tag, VR Chat, Rec Room. That's what people are really using this headset in huge quantities constantly for.
So where I'm going with that, and what I'm trying to understand is what does it do to the devs that built their entire businesses around this curated garden? they assumed that they would only see what 3-4 apps released a month to the store to compete with. Now they have 40 copies of Gorilla Tag submitted before lunch to compete with. That's how what does that do to their businesses and their plans?
Yeah, that's an absolutely great point. This thing launched with a console model. I remember how controversial this was when Oculus Quest was announced, and I think it was within a few months Meta had revealed this. I think, it was like announced in October 2018, launched in May 2019, and maybe it was like December or January. I might be wrong here. This is a very long time ago that they revealed this store is going to have a console like curation approach. And this was hugely controversial at the time. People were saying, what on earth? This is a crazy thing to do. This is going to massively constrain VR. But you're right to say that there are some studios who did see that and went, okay, this is something where we can build and not have to compete with sludgeware. And so maybe there are some business models that are going to be competed with there. There are maybe apps today on the store that are charging $20 or $30 that when this flood comes in, they're going to have $5 alternatives and $10 alternatives. And maybe those alternatives aren't as good, but maybe they're 50% as good and 60% as good at 20% the price. And unfortunately, many people, including myself, on a subjective basis, wish we lived in a world where people wouldn't take that offer of 50% the quality for 20% the price. But we do live in a world where plenty of people are going to do that, and that is going to hurt those developers pretty harshly.
I don't know if anyone is really prepared for just how cooked society is, right? Like we joke about it on this show, but some of the top destinations in all of those places you just described is McDonald's. And it's not McDonald's from the McDonald's brand, it's McDonald's produced as a role play experience for children to go in and see what what it would look like to work at a McDonald's. It's Job Simulator recreated on the actual world, and it's kind of insane that's what children are doing, is role playing jobs that they don't want to have in a few years.
Yeah, I mean, look at what happened to the iPhone in terms of the quality of games and depth of games after a massive flood of developers came in after the original flood, right? The original iPhone developers were these people who were very clued into Apple, that had lots of experience, and they were selling to this kind of like affluent market of early adopters. And then over time, as more and more people got iPhones and more developers came in, you saw the quality of apps go down, the price of apps go down, and a complete kind of flip. And you get this situation where like the latest iPhone is like what, 5 times as powerful as a Nintendo Switch, and yet the kind of games that are at the very top of the App Store are just of a complete sludge quality compared to the type of games that you would get on a Nintendo Switch. Even if you cancel out the advantages of physical controls versus touchscreen, it's not just that; it's like a completely different approach. And this almost gets a little bit like snobby or into like kind of what's the word, elitism. But and some people would maybe rightly point out that if that's what the market wants, then that is what is better on a population basis. But that is going to be a loss to the quality of experience in something like VR, where you're not just looking at something that's on a little rectangle in your hand, you're fully immersed into a environment in a fully immersive VR scenario that is the quality and depth of the experience can dramatically change what you're doing from in a way that I just don't think a mobile game does. And it'll be a shame in some ways to see those market trends and those monetization strategies arrive in this market.
Mr. Mycelium, I've appreciated their comments throughout the show. That's been very useful, interesting comments. But saying that regarding my analysis of the McDonald's stands in virtual reality, saying that I'm not sure it's that they want to role play doing those jobs as much as they just like seeing meme characters ordering a Big Mac, and that does seem like it would describe the pure joy of that place. But it's also very similar narratively, like thematically, to what Job Simulator is as a whole concept.
Yeah, Inferno9 has an interesting comment here that points out a third monetization system that we haven't talked about that is heavily on the rise and is very interesting, which is a subscription service. They point out that Apple Arcade, with Apple Arcade, the good iPhone games are now behind a subscription. So what they've done with Apple Arcade is to say, you pay us, what is it, $6 or $8 a month, somewhere around that, And we'll give you these games that are free of ads, that are high quality, that are designed around giving you a great gameplay experience, not around, the most hellish metric of how many ads have you clicked or how much in-app payments can we trick you into buying. That like an Apple Arcade, I tried it on my iPad. I thought it was great. It was actually felt like the golden age of mobile gaming again. It feels more like what you're used to on a handheld console than a mobile app store. And so we've seen recently, obviously, Meta with their Quest Plus subscription, which I assume is going to have to be renamed to Horizon OS Plus at some point, now has this games catalog where they're going to do the same thing. And I wonder, will Meta eventually pay studios or use their own studios to build games that are only available through Quest Plus? Because we talked about before how that
They're doing it on
model,
Horizon, right?
yeah, I mean, yeah, for Horizon, but it's very, very different if it's a subscription model. I think this idea of like curated high quality content for a subscription is a really interesting business model. When it came to Apple TV Plus, we talked about a few weeks ago how it's one of the ways that Apple is able to deliver immersive video, right? Nobody wants to pay per 360-degree video, right? Very few people, at least. But if you put it into a $6 a month subscription where you get a bunch of these 360 videos that come in, you then have a steady revenue stream that those creators can be assigned, that they are still able to bring in content. I think it's the subscription, the rise of subscription in this is more interesting than it's getting credit for. But I know there are a lot of people who heavily push back against the idea of a subscription, that hate the idea of not owning the thing. I just think they're probably the loud minority in this.
Well, I think that's when you're talking. That's why I focused on the $100 plus games. Like, when you start realizing that the thing you love is something you're going to spend years with, rather than like a 3-month period or even a 2-month period, you start thinking about what accessories or posters or things that actually let you describe your relationship to that world a little bit more. And you start thinking about the platforms, you start thinking about your friends and who you can get into the games with you to play that world. And we're seeing amazing strides over on Steam to have like if you have multiple copies of the game within a family, you actually can parse out those copies on a per person basis to give licenses to each person in the house. That's where I'm going with this, David. Like, where you're, if you go back to Apple and Nintendo, those are companies that are old enough to remember what it was like to have entitlement and licensing for a specific piece of technology, like totally offline. And every company after that, Facebook and Meta, or Facebook/Meta, right? They assumed that everything has to be online. But there's a certain amount of companies, there's a certain people in our audience that know that when you start talking about hundreds and hundreds of dollars in software, all it takes is a changing business model to make that stuff wiped out, that subscription be worthless overnight. And like, I know there's people still sporting some unlocked copy of Photoshop from 1999 because they don't want to go onto that subscription with Creative Cloud. And that's like, there's still going to be a lot of people that won't do subscriptions. And I still think that, like, the idea of owning the thing that you love is still, like, you can't get rid of them completely.
I think there are some people who deeply, deeply feel that way. And again, I respect that. It's just about what is a lot. I don't know if on like a market scale, that's actually a significant number of people. If it was, you wouldn't see the trend to subscription, and you wouldn't see companies that are pushing for a subscription only, like Adobe, for example, have such huge success in that. And again, there's always going to be people who prefer physical media. For example, there's still like people who have vinyls, for example. So people who are really into having physical vinyls. I'm sure there's still people who are hugely into CDs and obviously DVDs and Blu-rays. I myself like Blu-rays for their bitrate, for example. This is I'm making a distinction here between what I like personally and what I think a huge percentage of the market actually are responding to. Like, do I like having Blu-rays? Sure. Do I accept that the vast majority of people prefer a subscription streaming service? Absolutely.
What I think we're going with this, David, and I think this is time to wrap up this show because it's gone way over time. And I want to thank you to our audience. I saw Gamertag popping in there near the end of our stream. Thank you for tuning in. Yeah, it's been a fun week to get back into this. Cover gaming news over there with Don Hopper on our other show. Go check that out, and then get into all this wide stuff with David. I what I want to just push back at you there, David, is like there's a very long history of giving you like a physical object that's very, very low value with a little bit of technology inside of it that's representative of a big software download that you go and get. And I don't know if it's Pogs or coins or something like that, some kind of small little collectible. But this idea of having a small little collectible in your house that unlocks something inside of your virtual world is a really, really cool in between idea I'd like to see work out over the time.
It's a cool novelty, and some people will like it, but it's just like what it's not how you get your content on your iPhone. The Xbox Series X, the Xbox Series S doesn't even have a disc tray. We've seen Sony's new PlayStation. It's now discless by default and it's like a disc add-on.
They all have computer vision, though. All these soup systems have computer vision, and they can look at my little coin in my hand and decide if it's counterfeit.
Sure, but
Yeah,
like, how many people want to wait for the coin to arrive from Amazon?
amiibos, right? I'm describing amiibos, and I described
it's a
amiibos
cool novelty.
without it.
Amiibos are a perfect example of this novelty. It's just, is this the way people want to get their content at scale? No. It's a cool novelty though, absolutely.
Yeah, all right. I'm ready. I'm ready to support carrier pigeon SD card distribution. I think we can get 100 gigabytes by carrier pigeon more effectively than you can get the internet through the American internet system. All right, that's been fun. Let's talk next week. I think we'll be back on Tuesday. Should be our normal time. I think we will have a special show probably on Monday with some embargoed news coming out. So do encourage you to subscribe to UploadVR.com, become a member on UploadVR.com, subscribe to our channel here, and keep up with our relentless news push this year. Thank you so much. We'll see you in the future.
Thanks so much, everyone. We will see you next week.
I brought back Pogs.